For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. We've got a belter of a show for you today, an absolute cracker. Welcome to that Martin Daubney show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today's immigration data shows an 11% decrease in work visas, but that's at 286,000. That is still a city the size of Newcastle in just 1 year. And with small boat arrivals up since the election, can the Labour Party ever take back control of our borders? In a short while, we'll be joined by Nigel Farage for his take. Next up is Labour eyeing up a return to freedom of movement with the European Union. Well, under this new proposal, under 30s will be free to work or study in the UK, which critics say would drive down wages and swamp our universities with foreign students and, of course, send net immigration spiralling. Next, a wonder drug that can ease Alzheimer's in 27% of sufferers has been approved for use in the UK today, but controversially rejected by the NHS on the same day on the grounds of cost of £20,000 per patient per year. Now, with private patients able to access this wonder drug, is this yet more proof of a two-tiered health service? Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. We've got so much to talk about today. The immigration figures are out. The politicians are trying to put a positive spin on it because work visa numbers are down. But let me tell you this, 286,000 in a single year arriving, a city the size of Newcastle. Does that, to you, feel like we're taking back control of our borders? And there's more. Asylum cases have tripled in the past year to a 40-year high. I put it to you again. Does that feel like a government that's taken back control? Also, Sir Keir Starmer is dancing with Brussels, talking about reopening freedom of movement to the under-30s. Remember the last time? Plasterers, brickies, truckies, students, hospitality workers swamping the British job market. Does that feel like a government taking back control of our borders? Next, we've got Nigel Farage. I put those questions to him. Get your views across. The usual way, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. It's 3:02. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Now, a hunt for 2 dogs is underway after a 33-year-old man was found dead in the back garden of a property in Birmingham. West Midlands Police says the man is thought to have been attacked by at least 1 dog, which may have contributed to his death. Officers were called to Hereford Close in Rubery yesterday to report that a number of dogs were loose. 2 dogs were seized at the scene by officers. Police are now looking for 2 other dogs they believe may have been at the address at the time. It's not clear which of the 4 dogs was responsible for the attack. 3 police officers have been hurt after being attacked at Manchester Airport. The incident happened yesterday morning when police were reportedly investigating an abandoned car at Terminal 2. 3 people were arrested, with 1 man reportedly tasered. Greater Manchester Police have confirmed they are investigating and have said assaults on officers are unacceptable and we will not hesitate to take action should any criminal offences be found. The government has released their quarterly migration stats. Legal migration is down, whilst illegal immigration remains steady. One figure shows Afghans make up the biggest nationality crossing the English Channel on small boats. There were close to 1,900 asylum applications in the so-called legacy backlog that were still awaiting an initial decision at the end of June this year. Around 76% of withdrawn applications in the year to June were classed as implicit withdrawals, meaning the Home Office chose to withdraw the application. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has been speaking on today's figures.
Well, the time that I was responsible for our immigration policy, we've seen very dramatic improvements in the figures. We have seen applications reduce. We have seen the grant rate come down. We have seen the removals increase. Small boat numbers come down. Illegal arrivals come down. This is what I achieved when I was Home Secretary, because I made the difficult decisions. And sadly, what we have seen since Labour have taken over is that they are reversing a number of those decisions. They are easing the visa restrictions that I put in place.
3 people have now been arrested after the death of a delivery driver fatally injured during an attempted theft of his van. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder, while a woman has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. 42-year-old Claudio Carol Condor was killed as he attempted to stop the theft of his van in Leeds on Tuesday evening. Officers found the victim was unconscious when they arrived and he was given emergency treatment, but ambulance staff were unable to save him and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Figures from the business and technology world have paid tribute to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed today. He was among the dead after a superyacht sank off the coast of Sicily this week. The search has resumed for the remaining person who's still missing. The 5th out of 6 bodies in total so far was recovered from the wreck and brought ashore this morning, as rescue efforts are continuing into a 4th day now. The Italian Coast Guard has confirmed that the 6th and final person is a woman. 6 people, including Mike's 18-year-old daughter Hannah, were unaccounted for after the vessel sank in the early hours of the morning. The Italian Coast Guard says a decision on whether to raise the sunken yacht from the seabed is not on the agenda, but that it will be. Hundreds of thousands of teenagers have received their GCSE results, with a slight drop in the proportion of top grades awarded from last year. More than a 5th of entries were awarded the top grades, slightly down on the 22% last year, but higher than in 2019 before the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said in a post on X, formerly Twitter, "Congratulations to those receiving their GCSE results today. You've done an incredible job." And a drug found to slow down Alzheimer's has been given the green light for use in Britain. Experts say the drug lecanemab, which is the first of its kind, has been shown to slow down the disease by almost 30%. The ruling means it can now be prescribed to private patients before a decision is made on whether to offer it on the NHS. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now let's get cracking, because the long-awaited figures on legal and illegal migration to the year to June 2024 were released this morning, with the number of work visas issued falling by 11% to still an incredibly high 286,000, although this figure is still over double 2019 levels. And meanwhile, the number of detected arrivals by illegal immigrants fell by 26% to over 38,000, with over 81% of those arriving via small boats. Now, this all comes as reports suggest that the government is planning also to relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union to allow more young Europeans under the age of 30 to come and live and work in the UK, with a reciprocal agreement for young Brits to have easier access to the European Union. Now, to me, that sounds like the opposite of Brexit. Let's cross over to Clacton on Sea now and speak with GBNews reporter Ray Anderson, who's with a man who no doubt will have a few strong opinions on this. Ray, you're with Nigel Farage. Over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. I'm here with the leader of Reform UK and Clacton MP, Nigel Farage. He's here at the Clacton Air Show. Nigel, events like this give you the opportunity to speak to the local people. What are they saying to you about these immigration figures?
Well, I mean, they're just negligible declines from all-time record numbers. I think one of the biggest things is house building. Everywhere you go within this constituency, there's 50 new houses here, 100 new houses there. We're told from the Labour government those targets from central government will double. So the impact on an area like this of just the new houses, with, by the way, no more GP surgeries, no new roads, is really, really big. So people are unhappy, and they feel that in the Brexit referendum and in voting for Boris, they voted for all of this to be put under control, and they've frankly been ignored. And that's why they voted for me here. That's why they voted for reform.
One of the comments we've been receiving is this figure that we're hearing about how many billions of pounds is spent dealing with illegal migration to the UK. People are saying that the roads, and they wonder if that money could be spent in a better way here in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, chap at lunch was saying he met a bloke the other day in Ipswich, just up the road, 22-year army veteran living rough on the streets. And he said, well, how can it be that a bloke like that, that's got a few mental issues, PTSD issues, is on the street, and somebody crosses the channel and gets put in a 4-star hotel? It's the sense of unfairness. It's a sense of injustice, and it burns very, very strong. And if Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer think they can brush this issue under the carpet, they're wrong.
One of the concerns as well, local residents have said to us, is that they have concerns about waiting lists at the NHS, availability of getting a dentist, an NHS dentist. But then if you look at these figures, these numbers, we know that the number of health and social care work visas have gone down by about 26% for legal immigration to the UK. And so do you think that we're seeing the wrong kind of areas being reduced for migration?
Well, look, I mean, the point about health and social care, health is we've capped the number of people going to medical schools. Aren't training enough doctors, so we rely on imported doctors. What kind of madness is that? And the same for nursing. We've made nursing an unfashionable profession. We've not encouraged people. We've made them go to university to get degrees before becoming nurses. God knows why. And so we take nurses from Africa and places where they probably need it even more. So no, I think what these figures tell you through all the different sectors, whether it's skills with engineering, whether it's medical profession or care, is we need to be training our own people to do these jobs. And I say that with 9.4 million people of working age in Britain simply not working.
When it comes to illegal migration to the UK, Labour's keen to stress that they are clamping down on that. Something like 100 new National Crime Agency investigators, also financial penalties for businesses who hire illegal migrants, and the possibility of prison as well. Is that enough? And if it's not enough, what would reform do?
I've heard it all before. Priti Patel said all the same things. If you employ illegal migrant workers, we'll fine you. You may go to prison. Massive penalties for smugglers. Life imprisonment. None of it. And you could put 1,000 new enforcement officers in place. But if the European Court of Human Rights stops you deporting people, what difference does it make? are very clear that a country is not a country without controlling its borders. And you'll never do that with that activist foreign court in Strasbourg, which, remember, stopped that plane taking off to Rwanda back in 2022. We are clear that is the first step.
Can't let you go without asking you about these Labour plans to potentially relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union to allow young people to come and live and work here, and our young people vice versa to go and live and work in Europe. What's your response to those plans?
Some of our young people will go to live and work in Europe, but many, many more from Europe will come and live and work and settle full-time here. And many of them may be lovely people, but our population explosion is the biggest social problem we face in Britain. Whether it's housing here in Clacton, whether it's access to GPs or dentists here or anywhere else, a 10 million increase in the population since Blair came to power has devalued the quality of life of everybody. It can't go on.
Nigel, Martin's got a question he's going to ask via me, so Martin, take it away.
Yeah, so the figures today show that the asylum cases granted have tripled in 1 year, a 40-year high. My question to Nigel is, will this get any better under the Labour Party or not?
Martin's saying that the asylum cases have tripled in 1 year. He's asking, will this get any better?
So what we saw in the figures this morning was the productivity of the Home Office civil servants literally collapsing in the year up to the general election, just not processing cases. Therefore, as Martin rightly says, the waiting list gets longer, but Labour will wave a magic wand, Martin. They'll solve all of it. They'll let everybody stay.
Nigel, thank you very much for your time. Really do appreciate it. We've been here all day getting the views of local people. Of course, Labour have been keen to say, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper saying that they're taking strong and clear steps to boost border security and ensure that the rules are respected and enforced. And many people do see these this decrease in legal immigration as a positive step.
Thank you, Redison, and thank you to Nigel Farage there in Clacton. Superb stuff. Now joined in the studio by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, Nigel in fighting form there. And I guess the point is this, James Cleverly was doing the rounds earlier, because, of course, these are figures from the Conservative regime, almost from a previous lifetime ago, trying to claim that these were a victory because they're slightly down. But the bottom line, two figures that stand out to me, it's still in 1 year a city the size of Newcastle, and that's just the work visas, let alone the student visas, 286,000 work visas, and the asylum cases tripled to a 40-year high. Do you think that the Labour Party understands the magnitude of this issue and will actually do anything about it? The Tories didn't. Now they're in power. Have they got the appetite to tackle this?
Well, I think that's a really, really good question. Over the election campaign, it seemed a little bit as though Keir Starmer would rather talk about anything apart from immigration. On illegal migration, obviously, he's put an end to the Rwanda scheme, which, let's just remember, was not up and running by the time Rishi Sunak left office, came into all sorts of difficulties between when Boris Johnson first started talking about it in June 2022 and when the election was called in June 2024, there had been no migrants actually sent to Rwanda. That said, you know, there was, in the minds of ministers and in the minds of quite a lot of officials too, there was a route to that Rwanda plan working, and Keir Starmer has thrown it out. There are those who are saying, did he throw out the baby with the bathwater? Because it doesn't really seem as though he has an alternative plan for illegal migration, particularly apart from increasing the number of caseworkers in the Home Office, which might well be necessary. When we look at these statistics today, it does seem as though the asylum system essentially ground to a halt in the year before the election. On legal migration, I mean, the numbers are down, and yes, you can say that they are still double the numbers in 2019. It isn't an all-out victory by any means, but James Cleverly is making the point that those numbers have decreased by about 26% on, it must be said, record highs last year. But that is because of changes that the Conservatives brought in, and those changes were not allowing care workers and students to bring in their dependents when they come here. What is Labour going to do about that policy? By the sounds of it, they're going to try and keep it in place. But is Labour committed enough to getting our own sort of homegrown workers in the NHS and care sector? Because if this policy is going to work, we will need to replace those people who were coming over here, because that drop is very, very significant on work and social care visas. We will have to replace them with Brits.
Now, Olivia, I'd like to ask you about the idea that's been touted now, I think, 3 or 4 times in recent weeks, and that is the return of freedom of movement in the European Union. Now, I know that you speak to Labour ministers and they will vehemently deny that this is going to happen. In which case, Olivia, why does the idea keep getting floated out there? Are we being nudged? Are we being fluffed up for this to be feathered in a backdoor betrayal of Brexit?
No, I think that's a really good question. I mean, you could say no smoke without fire. The Labour ministers I've spoken to have said that that they are not planning to introduce a freedom of movement deal. But the idea does keep coming up. And we know that Keir Starmer does want to reset Britain's relationship with the EU. What he wants is a veterinary deal so that food coming over from the UK to the EU and vice versa isn't subject to so many checks. And he wants some sort of science and research agreement with the EU. Now, in exchange, the EU have said that they would like to see some sort of freedom of movement. And one option that seems to be on the table is a deal whereby Brits between the ages of 18 and 30 could go to an EU country for up to 4 years to work, volunteer, study, etc. And in exchange, EU citizens between 18 and 30 could come over here. Now, obviously, that would be very, very controversial among Brexiteers, because one of the key reasons for Brexit was to stop that freedom of movement. And this would essentially sort of bring it in again by the back door. Does Keir Starmer... I mean, I reckon that instinctively he would quite like to go for this proposal if it would get him what he wants with the EU.
Totally.
But would he be willing to push ahead with it when obviously it would be seen as very controversial and would give a lot of fuel to the Conservatives' fire?
OK, Olivia Ridley, thank you. Excellent stuff. Now, joining me to discuss this further and dissect those figures, I'm joined by the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Tony, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. You've been very vocal in terms of the Labour Party's plans to tackle all of this. We saw legislation in yesterday, the promise of 14,000 deportations before the end of the year. Do you think that there's a direction of travel there where that's even possible? Is that going to happen? Have you got any faith that today's figures will get any better under the Labour Party?
Well, I think, hi, Martin. I think if we can strip some of the political rhetoric away from this, it is politically toxic debate, and look at it in a kind of a neutral lens, these figures aren't bad, actually, whichever way you cut them, because if you are interested in immigration control, there has been a significant drop in some forms of legal migration, notably the social care sector visas and their dependents. Those visas are significantly down. There are still very high levels, as you say, of worker visas. That is that's not anywhere near what it used to be. But the general mood is that legal migration, they have got a bit of grip. Remember, this is June 23 to June 24. So when we're talking to politicians about it, it was under the Conservatives that these figures are reflecting themselves. But I think they probably left it a little bit late, really, because they also presided over record levels of migration on their watch. So I guess James Cleverly is right to say, well, yes, some of the things he put in place were beginning to work, but I mean, I'm afraid it's rather late in the day for them in terms of the election. I mean, on the illegal migration front, let's be really clear about what's happened with the small boats. Is yes, the numbers are down year on year. That is mainly because of the initiative we spoke about before on Albania, Martin, where there was a specific effort with an Albanian task force to come to an agreement with the Albanians that anybody coming by small boat would be returned, and they were, and that worked, and that was a targeted intervention against a specific group of people, which were actually causing us quite a lot of them were causing us serious problems in terms of safety and security as well as immigration. So there are things that can be done. I mean, I think the big difference, Martin, which I've been saying ever since the Labour announcements of yesterday, is the abolition of the Rwanda scheme, because I felt that was a really, really bold effort by the UK. It's only ever been done before by the Australians, in my knowledge, and I've been in this game a long, long time, where you can actually say to somebody, no, you're not going to be admitted into our asylum system at all. We're not going to even listen to an asylum application from you, because we're going to pass legislation which means you can go to another country. and they will consider your asylum application and you can stay there. You won't be sent back to a war-torn country. And I thought that was a really bold initiative, but of course the legal obstacles that cropped up for 2 or 3 years for the last government, there were so many opponents of that plan that it didn't come to fruition. So that leaves us in a place, Martin, where we can remove some of the boat people to source, as we did with Albania. There are other cohorts like Turkish people, Vietnamese. I think, more and more of these top 10 cohorts I'm looking at, Bangladesh, India, these are countries that I know we can remove people to. We can consider their asylum claims quite quickly and send them back there. So they need to be targeted. That's what they're pinning their hopes on for, I think, for the higher removals figures they've set. But for places like Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan, where are they going to go, Martin? Are we just going to give them all asylum here? Because they probably would qualify if they can get it. But if we do that, well, how many more are going to come? And I think these are all imponderables that we're not yet really seen. We've seen green shoots of what Labour are going to do, but we haven't really seen, had time really to see how this is going to bed in and whether or not this is going to make any real difference to the intake of irregular migration to the UK.
Excellent stuff. An absolute font of knowledge. Tony Smith, I'd love to speak longer, but simply ran out of time. Former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith, magnificent. Thank you very much. Now, it's the final week, 2 weeks of our £30,000 Great British Giveaway. So there's still plenty of time to get your entry in. Now, what would you do with all that extra tax-free cash? Well, here's all the details that you need for your chance to bag it.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
5 bodies have now been identified, including tech tycoon Mike Lynch. But the search for his 18-year-old daughter continues after the Bayesian superyacht sunk off the coast of Sicily. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
John Steinbeck once said of his 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath, that he intended to rip a reader's nerves to rags. Well, GB News sent its famously delicate Stefan Kyriazis to see an adaptation of the work in a London theatre, and somehow he's made it into the studio today. Give people a tiny background about The Grapes of Wrath. It's about the Depression, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Great Plains, which were absolutely ravaged by droughts. They'd completely overfarmed the topsoil, so they had all these huge dust storms, and basically the farms were worthless. So they reckon in the 1930s, about 3.5 million people left this huge central agrarian area of America, and this is a very poor, white working region. Often, many of them headed for the coast to California to this dream of orange groves, white houses, plentiful work. And we focus in on the Joad family, very poor, very working class. Tom Joad has just got out of prison for homicide in self-defence, and he's played by one of the Treadaways, Luke Treadaway, who I confused with his twin Harry.
Understandably.
They are identical. And so they pack everything into this kind of old-fashioned jalopy. It's a bit like Beverly Hillbillies, but not humorous. And I think there's about 13 people crammed, hanging off the sides, and they embark on this odyssey across the country. So there's all these huge themes about migration, about prejudice. They are viewed as an underclass by other Americans. So although they're migrants, they're not quite immigrants, but they're treated very poorly, as almost subhuman. When they get there, the dream turns out to be false, the pay is terrible, and then very often when they take the job the next day, the pay is halved. It's a terrible life.
It's a very angry novel.
It's an angry, dark novel.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:28. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the UK health regulator rejects a drug that could slow down Alzheimer's. Find out later in the programme about that. Now, 5 bodies have been found by divers searching the wreck of the luxury superyacht that sank off the coast of Italy this week. Tech tycoon Mike Lynch's body has been identified, but his 18-year-old daughter Hannah is still sadly missing. And joining us now from Sicily is the local journalist Alessandro Arena. Welcome to the show, Alessandro. In terms of the ongoing mission out there, what can you tell us? We have 5 bodies been recovered and have been identified, but the missing piece, tragically, is Mike Lynch's daughter. What's the latest?
The latest is that the research, first of all, thank you for inviting me and good afternoon to everybody. There are no news at the moment because from the morning when Mike Lynch was identified, they are still trying, the divers, to search for the body of Hannah, but the research at the moment has got no news. They're still trying, but it's very difficult because maybe she's in one of the cabins that hasn't been found in the relict, and right now the weather is good, but there are anyway no news about it. Maybe today is very difficult to conclude positively this research, and tomorrow there will be more news about it.
And Alessandro, there are fresh revelations into how it was possible that this super yacht was sank the way it was. The designer of the yacht said they were built to be unsinkable, and there are rumours now there may be an investigation, perhaps even followed by a lawsuit into how this boat went down so easily. There are rumours it was high in the water, its keel wasn't set right. Do you know anything about that?
It's very strange what happened because the weather conditions were really bad. The whole night here in Sicily, there were bad weather conditions, but it's very strange that a boat, such a big boat, went down like this, while the other one, which was next to it, didn't have any problem. So maybe many people talk about a human mistake, and it's a hypothesis really possible, but there are investigations about it. It won't be easy at all, and I think that it's something that will take away a really long time because there are no news right now about could ever happened, and everybody, both authorities and media themselves, are moving fumbling in the dark, maybe.
And Alessandro, can we expect any kind of formal press conference, do you think, from the police? In the United Kingdom by now, the police would have addressed the media to give information. That hasn't happened yet. Do you think that will happen?
I don't think so, because there are many things that have to be shown again. And at the moment, we just, like I said before, moving on hypothesis. So it means that the police doesn't have certain elements, and this means also that much time has to pass for discovering something that you can tell to the whole media. We move with what we see. So if we go to Porticello, as I did in the last days, and there is somebody who speaks to us, we will get some information. But an organized event in which police or fire department or Coast Guard talk to the whole media is really difficult at the moment.
OK, it's very unusual, very different from how it will be in the UK. Thanks for joining us and give us that full update there from the coast. Alessandro Arena, thank you very much, your local journalist. Now, coming up, we'll have a GB News exclusive on Reform UK to bring you. We'll be hearing from the chairman of the party. The party seems to be getting organised. That's coming later on in the programme. But first, it's your headlines, and here's Cameron Walker.
Thanks, Martin. It is 3:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Police are urgently trying to find two American bulldog-type dogs, one of which may have been attacked a man found dead in the back garden of his home. West Midlands Police were called to Rubery on the outskirts of Birmingham in the early hours of yesterday after reports that a number of dogs were loose. Officers say they believe the 33-year-old man may have been attacked by at least one dog, but none of the animals are believed to have been from a banned breed. Two dogs were seized at the scene, but police are looking for two others believed to have been at the house at the time. 3 police officers have been hurt after being attacked at Manchester Airport. The incident happened yesterday morning when police were reportedly investigating an abandoned car at Terminal 2. 3 people were arrested, with one man reportedly tasered. Greater Manchester Police have confirmed they are investigating and have said assaults on officers are unacceptable and we will not hesitate to take action should any criminal offences be found. The government has released their quarterly immigration stats. Legal migration is down, whilst illegal immigration remains steady. Afghans made up the biggest nationality crossing the English Channel on small boats. There were close to 1,900 asylum applications in the so-called legacy backlog that were still awaiting initial decision at the end of June this year. 3 people have now been arrested after the death of a delivery driver fatally injured during an attempted theft on his van. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder, while a woman has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. 42-year-old Claudio Carol Condor was killed as he attempted to stop the theft of his van in Leeds on Tuesday evening. Officers found the victim was unconscious when they arrived and he was given emergency treatment by ambulance staff, but was pronounced dead at the scene. Tributes have been paid to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed today. He's among 6 people confirmed to have lost their lives so far after a superyacht sank off the coast of Sicily this week. Another body was recovered from the wreck this morning and brought to shore as rescue efforts to locate the missing 6th person continues. The Italian Coast Guard has confirmed she is a woman. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter Hannah was among those unaccounted for after the disaster. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3096 and 1.1791 euros. The price of gold is £1,890 and 18 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,288.08.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Cameron. Now we've got absolutely loads to talk about for the break, including those immigration figures, Nigel Farage, and Reform getting organised. If you want to get in touch, send your views, gbnews.com/your say. Read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Heads up, there is going to be some unseasonably wet and windy weather pushing, particularly across northern parts as we go through tonight and into tomorrow morning, all due to Storm Lillian, currently out in the Atlantic, but it is heading towards the UK. For the time being, there are still some decent dry sunny spells around, a few showers here or there, but as we go through the evening, we are going to see that wet and windy weather spilling initially across Northern Ireland, then into more parts of England England, Wales and Scotland as we go overnight. The heaviest rain likely to be across some parts of southwest Scotland, perhaps some eastern coastal parts. Here some flooding is quite possible. And worth bearing in mind, with all the unsettled weather around, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a warm but wet and windy start for many of us tomorrow morning. As we go through tomorrow then, it is the winds that are causing the greatest cause for concern. Around some parts of eastern Scotland it is going to be very windy, some heavy rain continuing here for a time through the morning, showers following in from the west. Showers for Northern Ireland. It's across northern England where we're going to have the strongest winds. Here gusts could reach highs of around 65 to 75 miles per hour, perhaps touching 80 miles per hour in the most exposed spots, so some disruption quite likely. Elsewhere and further south there will be some rain to start off with in the southeast, but that should clear away quite quickly. And then as the whole feature, that is Storm Lillian, clears away into the North Sea, yes, there will be some showers across Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland in particular, but for much of England and Wales it's actually going to turn pretty pleasant. Lots of sunshine around and temperatures probably a degree or so higher than today. With winds easing, it will feel a little bit warmer. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow, particularly across northern parts. Further south, it's looking like a largely fine end to the day, albeit something a bit cloudier and wetter pushing in to southern parts later on. That takes us into a pretty changeable and at times unsettled long weekend for many of us. There will be some heavy rain around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Slow traffic on the M62 westbound in West Yorkshire due to an earlier accident between junction 23 Huddersfield and junction 22 Rishworth Moor. Congestion on the M69 northbound in Leicestershire. It's all due to an overturned car just before junction 1 for Hinckley. We're also seeing slow traffic on the opposite carriageway as a lane has been closed to assist with the incident. Long delays on the M1 southbound in Derbyshire due to an earlier broken down car between junction 29 Chesterfield and the Tib Shelf services, which are located between junction 29 and 28. Queues on the M25 clockwise in Essex. It's all due to emergency repairs just after junction 27 for the M11. And we're seeing queues on the M32 southbound in Gloucestershire. The exit slip road has been closed for accident investigation work at junction 1 Hambrook. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now let's bring you a cracking GB News exclusive now. Yes, on the back of their election success, with the party winning their first 5 seats in Parliament, Reform leader Nigel Farage has decided that now switching from a nationwide plan to a local party structure is the way forward. Some increased democracy in the Reform Party. And to explain this and to bring us more on this exclusive is our political editor, Chris Hope, who joins me now in the studio. Chris, another sensational exclusive with the Reform Party. Tell us more.
Yeah, this matters. This is kind of below the line. It's what you do in the closed season at a football club before the big signings take place during the season. Zia Yousaf is the Reform UK Party chairman. He's given £200,000 to the party. He's the new chairman, in there for 5 weeks. He is behind the scenes to drawing up a new constitution for the party. Now, this matters because currently Reform UK, it was set up so quickly by Nigel Farage to take advantage of the concern about the Tories, etc., and Brexit, and so it became a vehicle for the election. It's only a company with about 15 shares in it, majority controlled by Nigel Farage. Members don't have any real say over who runs the party, and in a democracy you have to have the right of members to kick out a leader if they want to kick that person out. So I asked Zia Yousaf this earlier, and he said, of course it will. It will allow members, a new constitution will allow members to throw out the leader, whoever it is, Richard Tice, Ben Habib or Nigel Farage, whoever leads that party, very important. He also gave an indication of the scale of ambition with Reform UK. He's had a meeting this week of 70 branch chairs, another 70 coming up soon, 200 branch chairs appointed by the September Party Conference next month. And he reckons they can beat Labour and form a government in 2028, 2029. Here's what he had to say.
This party is no longer a pressure group, right? This is a serious political party. We are going a formidable force in British politics. We're going to be durable, we're going to be here to stay, we're going to be using modern technology, and most importantly, we're going to be helping to manifest and convert all of that energy and support into victory at the ballot box. There are so many Labour voters, even this year, who are non-graduate, working class people who work really, really hard, who essentially already can see just how much Keir Starmer's government are actively working against their interests. And look, Reform are the natural home for those voters.
Zia Youssef, he's the UK Reform UK Party chairman. Reminds me very much of the high calibre of candidates who signed up for the Brexit Party. You're smiling because you're one of those too, I feel like, Martin. But they were, interestingly, a different calibre of individual who signed up for the Brexit Party back in 2019. He does seem impressive to me, and he appears to be giving a degree of professionalism. Again, a very low base, by the way, just 5 MPs for the party. That means they get, by the way, £350,000 or so of short money annually from the state. That'll help fuel research and other work by this new party. A long way to go. I mean, he thinks they can beat the Tory party next election. In fact, Labour next election. I think that is a very, very long shot. But you are seeing a party here. They're planning 2,000 candidates at May's local elections. They're getting ahead of the game. The Tories don't have a leader until November the 2nd, and it seems that Reform UK is using that sort of fallow time post-election to really go for it.
Now, Chris, as well as having that democratic right to decide what goes on in the party, the other key thing we talk about all the time is having the ground game, the structure, knowing where your vote is, the tiresome shoe leather, the hard work that it takes to knock on doors.
Not glamorous.
Not glamorous to get people on local councils. Of course, we've got that coming up in May. We covered the story earlier this week of that council, the triple in Wales flipping into Reform. Is this the beginning, do you feel, of a party realising this is hard work, but they've got to get serious and they've got to start now?
It's the boring plumbing to make the bath run properly. It's the boring stuff behind the scenes. They're doing it now, straight off the election, to try and show they are going to try and be a serious party. Ben Habib, the former deputy leader, who currently seems to have fallen out with the leadership. He has no real relationship with Richard Tice, Nigel Farage and others at the top of the party. He says, on the back of this interview on GB News that ran out earlier, he says, thumbs up on Twitter, and here's to Zia Youssef, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. So Ben Habib buys this, and he's a big critic of the party internally. That matters. And I think whether it works or not, they are trying to build on the support in last month's election. 2 polls since then have shown a swing from Labour to Reform of 3 to 5 points. Reform are now ahead of the Tory party, who are becalmed on 20 points. So, early days, but they are walking the walk. They're not allowing last month's election to be a flash in the pan, Martin.
And what was interesting about that poll you mentioned, that was it a 6-point swing?
That was one of them.
One of them was from the Labour vote direct to the Reform vote. Now, Nigel Farage, the Reform Party, they said they're going to take this battle to the Labour Party, and we saw those riots, the social unrest in 7 of the most disadvantaged areas of Britain, also with the 7 highest asylum seeker levels. They're all Labour seats. There's been a lot of criticism, and today the throwback to open borders with the EU, freedom of movement of the under-30 Labour, asylum not really under control. Do you think we're starting to feel that the working class, that red wall vote, as it was in 2019, might be reconfiguring voting for Labour and switching to Reform, or is that too much of an ask?
Well, that's
is
what
it
happened.
too ambitious?
But that did happen in the last election. We did see, a lot of Labour voters go across, more Tory voters, but a lot of Labour voters going across the Reform UK party. The problem remains with Reform UK is it's a start-up. It doesn't know where all the voters are. The mainstream parties know where their voters are from, where they live, and they go back to them on the 4-year cycle, checking you're going to vote Labour or Tory. Yes, we are, and so it carries on. This party has no idea on-the-ground data, and that's why having these local chairmen matters, and that's why having 2,000 candidates at the council elections next May matters. When you start to put your tentacles into the bedrock of these local seats, you find out where the voters are, and when that happens, you can get them out.
Chris, it's a fantastic exclusive, and let's talk about it more in the next hour. Thank you very, very much. Brilliant stuff. Now, still to come, should students turn to apprenticeships as GCSE results fall? Because unlike Chris, I don't think plumbing is boring. But first, the UK health regulator rejects a wonder drug for Alzheimer's. Found out why in just a moment. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Prince Harry says we need to be more cautious when adopting artificial intelligence.
Yes. AI is scary. And I think a lot of people are scared and uncertain. And I think one of the solutions to that is education and awareness, because it's becoming harder and harder to stem the flow from the source, and therefore really it comes down to all of us to be able to spot the true from the fake.
Well, that was a whole load of nothing, wasn't it?
Wisdom.
Yes, we're going to get the thoughts now of former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray.
Well, I have to say, I actually agree with Harry and anyone else who says that we have to be cautious about things that appear on social media.
Disinformation and fake news is a controversial topic because who is the ultimate arbiter of truth and fact?
So do you trust Harry to determine?
Well, I don't trust Harry to determine that, no.
They never actually say what they want, though, in terms of social media and things. I mean, do they actually have an idea of what the online media landscape should look like? I mean, there's clearly a veiled attack on Elon Musk and the like, but do they just want anything nasty off there? They just want things that, you know, are then proven to be untrue at some point off there? You know, it's easy to stand and say, I want the online world to be safer and it to be less nasty and for there to be less untruths on there. Yeah. It's much more difficult, as we found out in this country and every other country, to actually work out what the policy looks like.
You're absolutely right, Emily, that it's all very well everybody jumping on the bandwagon and saying, oh, we've got to clamp down on social media. Like, I'm suggesting that as well. But, you know, they haven't come up with any solution to it, any program to make it safer and healthier for people to use.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's almost 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a life-changing Alzheimer's drug will not be given to NHS patients, as watchdogs have warned it is simply too expensive. Now, the drug was recently given the green light to be used in the UK, with experts claiming it was the beginning of the end for the disease. But the UK's health regulator has claimed that the benefits are just too small to justify the significant cost to the NHS. And to discuss this, I'm now joined by the Associate Director of Evidence, Policy and Influencing, Mark MacDonald. Mark, welcome to the show. So this drug sounds astonishing. It sounds like a clear breakthrough of a condition that's affecting more and more Brits and more people throughout the Western world as we age. Tell us about this drug. Is it lecanemab? Tell us how it works, and then we'll get on to why you think it was turned down by the NHS.
Well, hi, Martin. Thanks for having me on. This drug, I mean, it's a defining moment because for the first time we've got a drug which has been deemed safe and effective by one of the UK regulators, the MHRA, to be deployed to patients. So it's a really defining, exciting moment. It's off the back of decades of research. What the drug actually does, this one, is target and breaks down some toxic plaque that can develop in the brain cells of some people with Alzheimer's disease. And it targets that to such an extent, and it's a relatively modest extent, that it slows down the progression of the disease. And it's really exciting because it's the first ever drug which has been demonstrated and then approved, which slows down the progression of Alzheimer's disease, which, as you said in your intro, devastates the lives of so many people in this country.
Yeah, there are estimated 982,000 people in the UK now living with dementia, according to the Alzheimer Society. That's set to increase to 1.4 million by 2040. Now, this drug isn't suitable for everybody. There can be some side effects, but, Mark MacDonald, it does seem an astonishing breakthrough. And that brings us on to the thorny matter of the NHS turning it down. Now, you can access this drug if you're a private patient. It's about £20,000 a year, if I'm correct. But the NHS has ruled that too expensive. Mark MacDonald, do you think that's a short-sighted policy? Because end-of-life care is very, very expensive. That will only increase in terms of the social care costs. So in your opinion, in a cost-benefit analysis, should the NHS have given this drug the green light?
Well, dementia is a really costly disease area right across the board, over and above the potential patients that this drug would have helped treat. Look, the regulators have to weigh up lots of stuff across a number of criteria. The situation in this country is that we have a taxpayer-funded system and taxpayers require value for money. So we are in the unfortunate and, yes, disappointing position where we have one regulator suggesting and confirming that the drug is safe and effective and therefore likely to be used in the private sector to some extent, and not for the vast majority of people who could have been eligible. And we're really clear that's disappointing. That suggests a system that is not yet set up to deliver these kind of really groundbreaking, innovative new treatments to the people who deserve and should expect them. That's disappointing.
And Mark MacDonald, the situation will be the same as it ever was, and that is effectively there'll be two-tiered healthcare. Those who can afford to have this in the UK now will have the possibility of doing that because it's now fully tested, fully green-lighted, and those who cannot afford it will simply deteriorate on and on. It underlines that feeling, does it not, that we have a seemingly two-tiered health system?
Well, health inequalities and inequity in healthcare is rife within dementia, and probably the most stark example is that a third of people never get diagnosed at all with dementia, and diagnosis could and should be the key that unlocks good quality care, support, certainty that people should morally expect when they are living with what is the UK's biggest single cause of death. So yes, there's the inequity that this has inevitably produced, given that the regulators have come to two separate conclusions. But I would say, look, go back to what I said at the beginning. This is a big step. It is an exciting moment. These regulatory decisions are hard. There's lots to weigh up, and it's reflective of what is a new world in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And we can expect more to come online in the years ahead.
OK, thank you very much. We have to leave it there, Mark MacDonald. Thank you for your expertise. Superb stuff. Now, don't go anywhere, because after the break, there's lots more analysis on those all-important immigration figures. The city the size of Newcastle came last year. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But now it's time for your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Storm Lillian is going to batter some parts of the UK overnight, bring some very wet and windy weather, particularly to northern parts of England. But through today, we do have a cold front making its way southeastwards, bringing a bit of cloud and a bit of rain for some before it clears away as we go through into this evening. Elsewhere, some bright or sunny spells developing behind this system. Also a scattering of showers, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, one or two showers perhaps for western parts of England and Wales as well. Now, temperatures are going to be a little bit on the low side, low 20s towards the south, a few degrees lower than this further north, and feeling cooler than this in those strong winds, albeit they are going to ease for a time as we go into the afternoon. Still clinging on to some cloud and a bit of rain across the far southeast as we go through this evening, but that will eventually clear away. A brighter picture across central western parts of southern England and across the Midlands and Wales as well, largely fine and dry with some sunshine here turning cloudier, wetter and windier across Northern Ireland as Storm Lillian starts to make its approach. Meanwhile, it's going to be a showery evening across some parts of northern England and much of Scotland, particularly towards the west. The feature that is then Storm Lillian does make its way in as we go overnight, initially bring some wet weather to Northern Ireland, but then that heavy rain spills in across parts of Scotland, northern England and across Wales as well. And it's the winds that we do need to watch out for. Gusts of around 80 miles per hour, perhaps in some exposed spots, could cause some significant disruption. Because of the wet and windy weather, it is going to be a mild night, if not a bit warm for some of us, some places staying mid to high teens Celsius. But a very unsettled start to the day tomorrow. Watch out for those strong winds, could cause some disruption, particularly on the roads. But the feature does clear away towards the east as we go through the afternoon. Some showers following in behind across northern parts, and these could be a little bit heavy at times, but further south it's looking like it's going to be a largely fine afternoon. See you later. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Long delays on the M69 in Warwickshire. The outside lane is closed in each direction for a spillage following an earlier overturned car between junction 2 of the M6 at Coventry and junction 1 Hinckley. Queues in Essex, firstly on the M25 clockwise. There's a lane closed and the entry slip road is partially blocked for emergency road surface repairs just after junction 27 for the M11. And on the M11 itself, northbound, there's queues due to an earlier overturned vehicle between junction 9 Saffron Walden and 10 for Duxford. Queues on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. There's a lane closed for an accident at junction 21A St Albans, and it's slow on the M27 eastbound in Hampshire. The entry slip road is partially blocked due to a broken down vehicle at junction 5 Southampton Airport. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done. Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, immigration data shows an 11% decrease in work visas, but that's still an astonishing 286,000 last year, and that's still a city the size of Newcastle. And with small boat arrivals up since the election, can the Labour Party ever take back control of our borders? And on the same issue, is the Labour Party eyeing up a return to freedom of movement with the European Union? Well, under this new proposal, under 30s will be free to work or study in the UK, which critics say would drive down wages and swamp British universities with foreign students. We should also, of course, send net immigration soaring. What do you make of that? And next, a wonder drug that can ease Alzheimer's in 27% of sufferers has been approved for use in the UK today, but controversially, it's also been rejected by the NHS on the same day on the grounds of cost of £20,000 per year per patient. But with private patients able to access it, it is yet more proof of a two-tiered health service. All coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Also, a sensational GB News exclusive from our political editor, Chris Hope. The chairman of Reform UK has promised that the party will have democratic structure, including the ability to remove the leader if so desired. And the party is getting serious about its ground game and organisation across the country, promising 200 regional organisers by their conference in October. Is this the beginning of a political movement to challenge the big two at the next general election? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. National headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 4. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. Police are urgently trying to find 2 American bulldog types, one of which may have attacked a man found dead in his back garden. West Midlands Police were called to Rubery on the outskirts of Birmingham in the early hours of yesterday after reports that a number of dogs were loose. Officers say they believe the 33-year-old man may have been attacked by at least one of the dogs, but none of the animals are believed to be a banned breed. 2 dogs were seized at the scene, but police are looking for 2 others believed to have been at the house at the time. 3 police officers have been hurt after being attacked at Manchester Airport. The incident happened yesterday morning when police were reportedly investigating an abandoned car at Terminal 2. 3 people were arrested, with 1 man reportedly tasered. Greater Manchester Police are investigating, they've confirmed, and have said assaults on officers are unacceptable and we will not hesitate to take action should any criminal offences be found. New figures show legal migration to the UK is down, whilst illegal immigration remains steady. Afghans make up the biggest nationality crossing the English Channel on small boats. There were close to 1,900 asylum applications in the so-called legacy backlog that were still awaiting an initial decision at the end of June this year. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly says the reduced figures is down to the Tories.
This is what I achieved when I was Home Secretary, because I made the difficult decisions. And sadly, what we have seen since Labour have taken over is that they are reversing a number of those decisions. They are easing the visa restrictions that I put in place.
3 people have been arrested after the death of a delivery driver fatally injured during an attempted theft on his van. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder, while a woman has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. 42-year-old Claudio Carol Condor was killed as he attempted to stop the theft of his van in Leeds on Tuesday evening. Officers found the victim was unconscious when they arrived, and he was given emergency treatment by ambulance staff but was pronounced dead at the scene. Tributes have been paid to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed today. He's among 6 people confirmed to have lost their lives so far after a super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily earlier this week. Another body was recovered from the wreck this morning and brought to shore as rescue efforts to locate the missing 6th person continues. The Italian Coast Guard has confirmed she is a woman. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, was among those unaccounted for after the disaster. Hundreds of thousands of teenagers have received their GCSE results, with a slight drop in the proportion of top grades awarded from last year. More than a fifth of entries were awarded the top grade, slightly down on the 22% last year, but higher than in 2019, which was before the global pandemic. GB News has spoken to students in Derbyshire who received their results earlier today.
I'm really happy with them. Not everything's what I need to get into sixth form, so happy overall, yeah.
I'm really proud of myself. It's all worked out well.
I tried so hard, so I'm just so pleased. I got everything I wanted. I got a 6 in biology, which I wasn't sure I was going to get, so I can carry on doing it at 6th form, which that's what I wanted, so yeah.
Well, I think I've gone pretty good. Passed everything, so that's pretty good. And could have done a bit better in English, but what can you do?
A drug found to slow down Alzheimer's has been given the green light for use in Britain, but it may not be rolled out on the NHS because it costs too much. The charity Alzheimer's Research UK has urged the Health Secretary to step in, describing the news as deeply disappointing and warned it would only be available to those who could pay privately. The new wonder drug is the first treatment of its kind to be licensed for use in Great Britain and has been shown to slow down the disease by almost 30%. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now we've got some breaking news for you here. According to reports coming in, Jermaine Jenas has been sacked by the BBC and taken off air from both Match of the Day and The One Show following a complaint about inappropriate behaviour. And this is being reported by the Daily Mail and The Sun. I also saw it in The Express. And they say that the BBC have launched an immediate internal investigation after concerns were raised about the former England player, and he was quietly removed from the broadcaster's official channels. Sources say the star will fight to clear his name, and we'll bring you more news as we get it. Now, moving on, the long-awaited figures on legal and illegal immigration in the year to June 2024 were released this morning, with the number of work visas issued falling by 11%, but that's still at just over 286,000, and that's still double the figure of 2019 and a city the size of Newcastle in just 1 year. Now, meanwhile, the number of detected arrivals by illegal immigrants fell by 26% to over 38,000, with 81% of those arriving on small boats. Now, this comes as reports suggest the government is also planning to relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union to allow more young Europeans, the under-30s, to come and live or work or study in the United Kingdom, with a reciprocal agreement for young Brits to have easier access to the EU, which sounds like the opposite of Brexit. Now, let's cross over to Clacton on Sea now and speak to GB News reporter Ray Ellison. Ray, earlier in the show, you were with Nigel Farage. He had a somewhat frosty reaction to all of these figures. Bring us up to speed.
Well, here in Clacton, we've got the Clacton Air Show underway. Despite the windy conditions, you can see thousands of people come here to enjoy this event. We've had the chance to talk to them, and the general consensus seems to be that although legal immigration is down slightly, people in Clacton believe it's still too high. They believe it puts a strain on public services. And when it comes to illegal migration, there are concerns it's simply costing the taxpayers too much money, billions of pounds, and that could be better spent in places like Clacton on things like the roads and the NHS and so forth. I got the chance, as you said, to chat to Clacton MP and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. This is what he had to say about those numbers.
I've heard it all before. Priti Patel said all the same things. If you employ illegal migrant workers, we'll fine you. You may go to prison. Massive penalties for smugglers. Life imprisonment. None of it. And you could put 1,000 new enforcement officers in place. But if the European Court of Human Rights stops you deporting people, what difference does it make? Are very clear that a country is not a country without controlling its borders, and you'll never do that with that activist foreign court in Strasbourg, which, remember, stopped that plane taking off to Rwanda back in 2022. We are clear that is the first step.
Can't let you go without asking you about these Labour plans to potentially relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union to allow young people to come and live and work here, and our young people vice versa to go and live and work in Europe. What's your response to those plans?
Some of our young people will go to live and work in Europe, but many, many more from Europe will come and live and work and settle full-time here. And many of them may be lovely people, but our population explosion is the biggest social problem we face in Britain. Whether it's housing here in Clacton, whether it's access to GPs or dentists here or anywhere else, 10 million increase in the population since Blair came to power has devalued the quality of life of everybody. It can't go on.
Well, Nigel there initially responding to the point that I made that Labour are pledging to introduce around 100 new investigation officials for the National Crime Agency, and also fine business owners or potentially imprison business owners who employ illegal migrants. And then, of course, he was commenting on this idea from Labour of allowing freedom of movement for the under-30s across the EU from the UK to there and vice versa. And there's scepticism here in Clacton about how we could plan and protect our public services, housing resources, NHS dentistry as well, if we don't know how many people might be in the country in the next month or week or year. I also got the chance to chat to local business owners as well here. This is Jason Smedley, he's the owner of the Royal Hotel right here on the beachfront, and Vicky Hart, who's the complex manager for that hotel. This is what they had to say.
Time's going to tell. We're early days still. It can't get any worse than what it has been because we're at the maximum capacity that we can allow to come in. So it's just a matter of time to see if they're actually going to keep dropping. That's the key part. We need to make sure the figures are constantly dropping.
So, Vicky, obviously these numbers are coming down, but we need workers for the tourism industry, we need workers for health and social care as well. So do you think this is actually a positive step, or are there negatives here too?
It's a positive step, but also when do we actually start to see a change and an impact in this, especially not so much Clacton because it's not a high populated area, but more so London and areas around that. It's when we see lower waiting times in hospitals, when people can actually get houses and be seen to quicker. So yeah, let's wait and see really.
Well, despite those concerns that you've been hearing there from those business owners, from Nigel Farage as well, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has said we're taking strong and clear steps to boost our border security and ensure the rules are respected and enforced. That's certainly the message that Labour is trying to drive home, that these numbers are down and they are taking action.
Superb stuff. Thank you very much. Excellent reporting there, Ray Addison at Clacton-on-Sea. Now, to continue the conversation, I'm now joining the studio to dissect these figures with the former Labour MP, Dennis McShane. Dennis, always a delight to have your company. So, on the one hand, there is some good news, 11% down to 286,000 for work visas, but that's still a city the size of Newcastle. It's still double 2019. These are Conservative figures, of course, so let's not have a pop at the Labour Party. This was on the Conservative Party watch. I guess my question to you is, do you think there's any appetite in the Labour Party to try and get these figures down? Because small boats have been on the up since the general election.
I think there's an appetite. There's an appetite in every country in Europe. There was an appetite in the United States, and they elected a President, Donald Trump. You remember he promised to build a wall to stop all the Mexicans coming in. Not an inch of that wall was ever built.
What about 11 million come in the regime?
That is the problem. That is the problem. We all want fewer immigrants, but we all want more dentists, care workers, nurses, people to help us when we get old. I mean, Nigel Farage was looking rather wizened then. He'll need help before long, you know, to walk around and be in his chair. And we are not producing babies in this country. That's the problem. All over the West, there's not a baby boom, there's a complete baby shortage. So what are we going to do?
Well, start having more kids, but that's...
I've had 4, so I've done my duty by
You've
Britain.
done your bit. Let's get back to the asylum figures.
Yeah,
so, astonishing figure today, a 40-year high, in fact, the highest figure since we began recording. 68,000 cases granted to remain in the UK. That's tripled in 1 year. And Yvette Cooper's plans to introduce more migration officers for faster process. And that can only mean one thing, Dennis. It means even more people having the right to remain, because there's scant evidence so far they have any appetite to deport, despite the fact yesterday we heard 14,000 deportations before the end of the year. Do you think that's likely?
Look, again, I agree with you. James Cleverly, as Home Secretary last year, let in 654,000 people from Pakistan, Nigeria, India and the Philippines, many with dependents. This is a Conservative Home Secretary, James Cleverly, and he just opened the doors to not anybody who wanted to come here. It was to replace Europeans, basically. On asylum seekers, again, I agree with you. We can't send people, all the Ukrainians who've been granted asylum, back to be butchered by Putin. I expect we're getting a lot now from the Palestine Mideast area because of the war in Gaza. We can't send them back to that hellhole. And that's a nightmare. There's so many places in the world that are just breaking down thanks to social media, thanks to iPhones. Everybody can see a better life, whether it's in Canada or Britain or Ireland. All the other countries in Europe have got exactly the same.
Economic migrants have come in then, is what you're saying, a better life?
Well, not a better life.
Not genuine asylum seekers, just those who want a better life.
I mean, Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Eritrea. I mean, I could rattle through a lot of countries.
A lot of them coming from France.
We destroy. I don't think we've had.
Boats.
I don't think we've had any asylum seekers from France.
Well, they're all arriving via small boats via France.
They're coming in. Yes, they're coming into France. Many more are coming into France and into England, trying to stay there. A number who've got English, family here, contacts here, got the language skills, been told there's a job for them in the black labour market, which we don't control at all. Other countries have ID cards, much tougher trade union rules, much tougher workplace inspections. We have none of that in this country. So we've got the softest, most open, unregulated labour market in Europe. And there is an area, now that there's a Labour government that's supposed to be supporting, the British workers, I hope they will take tough action on that and tell the bosses, stop hiring people who've got no right to be here.
Dennis McShane, only a former Labour Party MP could say the answer to solving asylum is more unions. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Now, we've got more on that breaking news story we brought you a short while ago, and former footballer Jermaine Jenas has been sacked from presenting The One Show and also the Match of the Day show. The former Premier League player, 41, has been removed from the BBC One evening programme following an internal investigation by the corporation because of alleged complaints about his behaviour, The Sun has reported. A BBC spokesperson said, "We can confirm that he is no longer part of our presenting lineup." The ex-Spurs midfielder is understood to have instructed lawyers as he battles to clear his name, and it is believed that he is, quote, not happy with this decision. Now, to discuss this further, I'm joined by the former BBC Head of Religion and Ethics, Akhil Ahmed. Akhil, welcome to the show. A serious situation has emerged here. It seems to have been dealt with swiftly. Can you tell us more?
Unfortunately, none of us know more about this because obviously, I'm speaking now purely in a personal capacity. We don't know what's happened. What we do know is there's been something very swift, as you say. Many people often complain that the BBC takes too long, but an investigation has taken place. I don't know the ins and outs of it yet. I'm sure we will find out. Jermaine Jenas is defending himself robustly as well, but the BBC wouldn't have done this if they didn't feel pretty confident that they had something to do, that they were correct. So I think what we have to do is wait to see what happens. But I think, for once, I think we have to say they've been very swift in dealing with something, and the process has taken place, and now another process has to take place. Jermaine Jenas has to be given the opportunity as well to appeal against this incident as well.
And as said here, Jermaine Jenas is not happy with the decision. He's instructed lawyers. So now we'll be going through a lengthy process, a legal process behind the scenes. I'm assuming, as somebody yourself with extensive experience of working at the BBC, this will now be very methodical, very time-consuming, and in the meantime, Jermaine Jenas will be removed from our screens.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened. I think obviously once the complaint was originally made, there would have been an investigation, and that investigation would have taken quite some time anyway, and that would have been behind the scenes. I imagine what Jermaine Jenas is suggesting is that, obviously speaking to his lawyers, that he's not been happy with that internal investigation, and he is now going to be taking it further to clear his name, which he's entitled to do, because obviously if he believes he's innocent, then he has that opportunity to do that. but the investigation would have taken place. What this will do, obviously, is, Jermaine Jenas has the right to do that, and the BBC obviously have to defend themselves. So there will be time and a cost element to this, but he won't be back on screen until this has been resolved. And as far as the BBC is concerned, it has been resolved because they've acted swiftly, they've investigated, acted swiftly, and found him guilty. He's saying that he's not guilty, so then he obviously will now appeal. So it's just like a normal kind of process that any of us would expect to have if we felt we were in that situation and we felt we were innocent. If Jermaine Jenas feels he's innocent, he has to appeal against a decision that he thinks is incorrect.
Is there anything significant, do you believe, Akhil, in the fact they're using the word sacked? You may expect somebody to be suspended or removed from duty while an investigation is going on, but the word sacked seems to have more finality to it. It seems to be more of a conclusive move.
Well, I led to believe that they've had the investigation already, haven't they? And actually that they have found him guilty of whatever allegations have been made against him. So in that sense, it's not it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be during an investigation. The investigation has happened. He was taken off air, I think, during that period. I think the investigation has been concluded. And yeah, you're right. It's strong words, but effectively what they're saying is that he has been dismissed. He's been dismissed, sacked, whatever word you want to use, because they have felt, having done the investigation, that whatever he was accused of doing, he was guilty at least of something, of being caught doing something that they felt was inappropriate and not in line with the job that he had. Something which, if we were to look at other kind of instances, that may have happened recently with BBC or any kind of ITV or wherever it may be, with presenters, on-air presenters, we've all want to see an investigation take place. And when you get the chance to see that go through to the end, we want to see a result. If somebody is guilty, then they're found guilty. But also under law, if they feel that the person who has been found guilty has to have the opportunity, one, to defend themselves, and then secondly, if they've been found guilty, appeal against that as well, if they feel that they're innocent.
And as you said, there have been criticisms before, Akhil Ahmed, of these processes taking too long and presenters going on to receive a rather large salary while this process is ongoing. So in this instance, the action has been swift. And of course, it's important to point out that Jermaine Jenas has said he's contesting this. And so is there any indication of how long this process may take? The BBC. How does it go from here?
Well, it's not really BBC process now, is it? Because I think it's a case of if he's talking to his lawyers, it's then, of course, he's going to be complaining against what the BBC's internal process has come up with. So now it becomes it goes to the courts, as opposed to become a civil case, as opposed to being, it may take them to a tribunal and take them in terms of unfair dismissal, etc. So it's not so much that I'm presuming initially what will happen is I'm sure his lawyers would get in touch with the BBC. The BBC would probably say, look, we had a robust investigation, this is what we found. And then it's up to him then to see whether or not he wants to go through the civil courts or actually to take it to an industrial tribunal, which I presume is the most likely place. And that in itself can take quite some time. One, because of the backlog, and two, because of obviously the nature of the beast, it takes time to get into court, and of course, whilst you're in that particular tribunal, it doesn't get wrapped up in a few hours.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's important to point out, of course, we haven't heard an account or a statement from Jermaine Jenas here. He is denying this. He's saying he's contesting it. He's not happy about the decision. So, of course, we must, in the fullness of time, make sure we give a full and balanced take on that. But thank you for that clear and concise analysis there. That's the former BBC head of religion and ethics, Akhil Ahmed. Thank you very much. Now, 5 bodies have now been identified, including tech tycoon Mike Lynch. But the search for his 18-year-old daughter continues after the Sicilian superyacht sank off the coast of Sicily. We'll have the latest on that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Ben, do you like baking?
Baking? Only flapjack.
Why flapjack?
It's just a childhood favourite. Otherwise, no, I don't have time to do anything, no.
Yeah,
Do you?
I love baking.
Really?
Yeah, I find it really relaxing.
You never bring in any treats for me.
I know, I was thinking
Scones
that's
or
next,
cakes?
isn't it? Scones.
Oh, it's my birthday next week.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
You know what to do?
I've
You're not
really
here,
dug
are
a
you?
hole for myself now, haven't I? No, I actually am here next week.
OK, well, you know what to do then.
OK, I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by JP from Bridget's Bakery.
BB is the brand, is the face, is the smile. She originated the motto, making London smile, so that's what we try to do on board of our lovely buses and in our shops.
Which is probably the most British thing you could imagine.
Yes, we try to do a 3-in-1. We try to really embrace all of the culture and history, so Roadmaster buses, 1970s. Oh, nice pictures. We have the full afternoon tea, 1700.
JP, is it scone or scone? And also, where does the word come from?
Ben.
Is it of French origin?
Ben, how very dare you asking me? Are you trying to actually put me under the spotlight? I would say, according to a Belgian person, it's scone.
Scone.
Exactly.
Oh, that's what
so I like to do a mix of both. But I would say...
Sorry, JP.
Common as muck. and another key question which many Brits get tangled up in is it the jam first or the cream first?
So, I'll tell you a very scientific fact I just made up on my way here this morning. The best way to eat your scone or scone is, first step, you split it in 2 halves.
Yeah.
On one half, you do the cream and jam. The other half, the jam and cream.
Oh, no.
Then, if you feel like people looking at you, you should squash it together. And if really the tension is quite high, you should give your scone to the nearest person holding a chef jacket. There you go.
That sounds too diplomatic.
Yeah.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:27. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Police have issued an urgent appeal for 2 dogs they believe are responsible for a fatal attack that left the man dead in his garden. Officers were called to a property in Rubery in the early hours of Thursday. 2 dogs have already been seized, but 2 other dogs believed to have been at the scene are still missing. Well, West Midlands Police say they believe the dogs are American Bulldog types. And joining me now for a full update is GB News' West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson. Jack, 2 dangerous dogs on the loose. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, this rapidly investigation now well underway as police are scouring this area of Rubery and Hereford Close and surrounding housing estates to try and find these 2 dogs they believe were involved in this attack on this 33-year-old man who was found dead in the garden of the house that you can see behind me. You were mentioning mine. They were called in the early hours to reports of a number of dogs on the loose. That's where they then found the victim, who they confirmed to have died, and were able to seize 2 dogs. It's 2 other dogs that police confirmed in a press conference today that they're still in the process of looking for. They have got neighbouring police units. We've already seen another police van just in the last 5 minutes do another scour of this particular housing estate. They've had the drone units as well of West Midlands Police involved to try and find these dogs. And this urgent appeal that they've put out, saying to people that if you see sights of the dogs, one of them they've already released a photo of online. It's a brown American Bulldog type dog with a white stripe down its chest. The other, they say, is black. They've issued this urgent appeal to members of the public to say if you see this dog or the black dog they're also talking about, to call 999 immediately. Do not approach it. And also similarly asking people that if they have heard stories of families, friends who have possibly possibly taken in any loose dogs in this area to call them immediately, so of course they can investigate those inquiries. This investigation does continue. The body of the 33-year-old man, the police confirmed today, is in the process of having a post-mortem examination in order to establish particularly of course the type of death. They do believe at this moment, at this stage, those dogs were involved in the attack. The police calling this tragic mainly because the gentleman who was found dead at the house here behind me was not living at this address. It's thought that the dogs were that of family and friends. No previous information that they previously attacked anyone. At this stage, they say there is no information to say these dogs weren't well looked after. But as I said, Martin, that investigation, that search for those two dogs, very urgently underway here.
Thank you, Jack Carlson, for that update in Rubery. 2 dangerous dogs on the loose. Thank you very much. Now, coming up, we'll have a GB News exclusive on Reform UK to bring you. We'll be hearing from the chairman of the party, and they're getting serious, he says, about democratising the party and mobilising the troops for the 2029 election. That's an exclusive from Chris Hope, and that's all coming up later in the programme. But first, it's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon, it's 4:30. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. And we have some breaking news to bring you. The BBC presenter and ex-footballer Jermaine Jenas has been sacked from presenting The One Show and Match of the Day after alleged complaints about his behaviour. Jenas was reportedly removed from the primetime BBC One programme, The One Show, following an internal investigation by the corporation. A BBC spokesperson said, "We can confirm that he is no longer part of our presenting lineup." In other news, 3 police officers have been hurt after being attacked at Manchester Airport. The incident happened yesterday morning when police were reportedly investigating an abandoned car at Terminal 2. 3 people were arrested, with 1 man reportedly tasered. Greater Manchester Police are investigating, they've confirmed, and say assaults on officers are unacceptable and we will not hesitate to take action should any criminal offences be found. New figures show legal migration to the UK is down, whilst illegal immigration remains steady. Afghans make up the biggest nationality crossing the English Channel on small boats. There were close to 1,900 asylum applications in the so-called legacy backlog that were still awaiting an initial decision at the end of June this year. The family of Morgan Stanley International Bank chairman Jonathan Bloomer and his wife Judy have described them as incredible people and an inspiration to many following their deaths in the sinking of a luxury yacht in Sicily. Tributes have also been paid to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed today. He's among 6 people confirmed to have lost their lives so far after a super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily this week. Another body was recovered from the wreck this morning and brought to shore. A rescue effort to locate the missing 6th person continues. The Italian Coast Guard has confirmed she is a woman. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, was among those unaccounted for after the disaster. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Heads up, there is going to be some unseasonably wet and windy weather pushing, particularly across northern parts as we go through tonight and into tomorrow morning, all due to Storm Lillian, currently out in the Atlantic, but it is heading towards the UK. For the time being, there are still some decent dry sunny spells around, a few showers here or there, but as we go through the evening, we are going to see that wet and windy weather spilling initially across Northern Ireland, then into more parts of England, Wales and Scotland as we go overnight. The heaviest rain likely to be across some parts of southwest Scotland, perhaps some eastern coastal parts. Here some flooding is quite possible. And worth bearing in mind, with all the unsettled weather around, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a warm but wet and windy start for many of us tomorrow morning. As we go through tomorrow then, it is the winds that are causing the greatest cause for concern. Around some parts of eastern Scotland it is going to be very windy, some heavy rain continuing here for a time through the morning, showers following in from the the west. Showers for Northern Ireland. It's across northern England where we're going to have the strongest winds. Here gusts could reach highs of around 65 to 75 miles per hour, perhaps touching 80 miles per hour in the most exposed spots, so some disruption quite likely. Elsewhere and further south there will be some rain to start off with in the southeast, but that should clear away quite quickly. And then as the whole feature, that is Storm Lillian, clears away into the North Sea, yes, there will be some showers across Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland in particular, but for much of England and Wales it's actually going to turn pretty pleasant. Lots of sunshine around and temperatures probably a degree or so higher than today. With winds easing, it will feel a little bit warmer. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow, particularly across northern parts. Further south, it's looking like a largely fine end to the day, albeit something a bit cloudier and wetter pushing in to southern parts later on. That takes us into a pretty changeable and at times unsettled long weekend for many of us. There will be some heavy rain around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Slow for the M1 southbound in West Yorkshire. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road for a broken down vehicle at junction 47 Garforth. Long delays on the M69 in both directions in Warwickshire. The outside lane is closed in each direction for a spillage following an earlier overturned car between junction 2 of the M6 at Coventry and junction 1 for Hinckley. Queue in traffic on the M6 southbound in the West Midlands due to an earlier accident at junction 10 for Wolverhampton. On the M25 clockwise in Essex, there's a lane closed on the main carriageway and the entry slip road is partially blocked. It's for emergency road surface repairs just after junction 27 for the M11. And queue in traffic on the M5 northbound in Gloucestershire. It's due to animals in the road between junction 11, the Golden Valley bypass, and 10 for Cheltenham. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:36. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now brace yourselves, because we're approaching the final 2 weeks of our £30,000 Great British Giveaway. So there's still plenty of time to get your entry in, but get your skates on, because what would you do with all that extra tax-free cash? Well, here's all the details that you need for your chance to trouser it.
You really could become the next giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British Giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt just a lot nicer. We went out for dinner. Just enter. And you never expect to win, but I did.
Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Fill your boots. Now, let's bring you a GB News whopping exclusive. Yes, on the back of their election success, with the party winning their first seats in Parliament, the Reform Party is back, and Reform leader Nigel Farage has decided to switch from a nationwide plan to a local party structure. To explain the democratisation of the party, to bring us more detail on this, is our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, you spoke to the party chairman earlier with some revelations.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Bear with me, it does sound a bit boring, but it's really, really important. This party, the Reform UK, 5 MPs after the last election, is actually a private company. 15 shares in it, 8 of them controlled by Nigel Farage. He's in charge, and that puts off people getting involved. Members don't like it. Other MPs might think, well, you know, who's in charge here? And also, crucially, members have no legal way or no enforceable way to remove a leader, whether that's Nigel Farage or Richard Tice or Lee Anderson or Rupert Lowe, anybody. And that is a problem, I think. And this guy called Zia Yusuf's come in. He's given £200,000 to the party. He's the chairman. He's made clear he wants to democratise that party, as Farage said he would do to GB News on the eve of the election last month. He made very clear we want to bring in more people. They had a meeting of 70 party branch chairmen in London this week. 70 more planned. 200 appointed by the party conference. But crucially, the changes to the constitution, while looks a bit boring are really, really important because they give powers to members that aren't there already. And earlier, this is what you had to say to me outside Parliament.
Look, we of course understand that members need to be given a democratic a set of rights in our constitution. That is what we are working on. That constitution, by the way, Chris, is an incredibly important document. We are chartering a course to be the party of government in this country in 2029. So that document must be fit for purpose today, for the next year, but also for when we're in government. And so we have to get that document right.
And will that document, when we see it, allow members to remove the leader, in this case Nigel Farage? That's what all parties must have, the right for members to remove a leader.
Of course it will.
Of course it will. There we have it. You see use of saying that Reform UK members will be allowed to remove the leader. That matters not because it's Farage or anybody, because you have to have that right as members of any political body to remove the boss.
A lot of people have been critical of this, including Ben Habib, who was formerly in the inner sanctum. He came on this show, in fact, and was saying this is what needs to be done. It put a few noses out of joint, but a lot of the party's critics as well have been saying if they don't get this into shape, then it will allow them to be attacked. Is this a move towards the party getting serious about the 2029 general election? It was on Tuesday, wasn't it? In fact, we saw them outside here. They've been to a big get-together. They do seem to be taking the shoe leather, the hard work of doing the ground game, winning council seats, dealing with wheelie bins, with potholes, with organisation, with local branch structure. None of that is sexy, but it's essential.
They do. That guy Ben Habib, the former deputy leader, who has no real relationship now with the top brass at Reform UK, he says in response to that interview on social media to this afternoon, here's to Zia, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. So Ben Habib gives it his seal of approval. The idea that Zia Youssef has got 2,300 councillors to fight for Reform UK and next year's election, 3,000 applicants for those roles. He is trying to build in tentacles to eat into the bedrock of these seats around the country. The problem Reform UK has got is they don't know where all the voters live. Lib Dems, Tories, Labour, they know where the supporters are because they've knocked on doors for decades. Reform UK haven't got that. They got away with it with a very busy air war, a social media war at last month's election. But in order to become the next party of government, and that's what Zia Youssef says, however outlandish that might sound, and it is quite outlandish, to be honest with you, they think they can win the election in 2028, 2029, and this is how they're going to start.
And what was fascinating about the general election that's just gone past is that it took like over 800,000 votes per seat for Reform versus about 25,000 votes per seat for the Labour Party. This scattergun approach, firing votes into the thin air, if you like, not knowing where their vote is, whereas the Liberal Democrats netted 70-plus seats.
By targeting seats, Martin.
By knowing where their vote is. So this is the prelude, is it not, to getting that data, getting the ground game and knowing where their vote is. It's the party getting serious.
They are getting serious, but whether they can get serious in 5 years, I don't know. They are on only 5 MPs. They get £300,000 or so from state money a year to do research and to develop structures within their party on research grounds. I think they've got a chance here, but I think it's a very long shot. The way we have our first past the post system, it is built against these challenger parties, but they have a good crack at it.
Is there a danger? And we saw this when Jeremy Corbyn was elected as the leader of the Labour Party. When you open your membership to getting rid of leaders or electing new leaders, a lot of people join who are mischief makers. A lot of Conservatives suddenly became Labour members to try and upset the apple cart. Do you think that that's one of the risks of doing something like this? You know, trouble causers can come in to try and cause these votes to go in a direction that may harm the party.
It's called entryism, and we did see that with £10 members. Ed Miliband brought those ideas in, and that allowed, of course, Corbyn to emerge. There will be ways to stop that happening, and there'll be probably... I've no idea. And in fact, Zia Youssef won't tell us. There might be a majority of MPs in Parliament plus councillors with a certain number of members can get a vote of no confidence. I have no idea. But we'll look very closely at that detail when it comes out. But they do recognise, and for the beginning, frankly, is recognising there's a problem. And I think Reform UK do recognise there's a problem and they're dealing with it. And that, to me, is they're growing up as a party.
And was there any mention, or would it be worth asking them in the future, would this allow members also to have an influence on policy.
Yeah.
The kind of things that an ordinary democratic boss would have. We need to have a policy formation that involves the membership. Is that something they may entertain?
Again, he won't write the Constitution live on GB News, much as I wanted him to when I asked him earlier. But no question, that's an idea. And the idea of having a mandate, say, for the chairman to be elected, that's what some candidates in the Tory leadership election are looking at. Don't forget, with the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, is elected by members. So the idea of having an elected voice at the very top of the party by members is something which I'm sure other parties might be looking at. I'm not sure, though, if Reform are doing it yet.
What's your take on Zia Yusuf? He's been very successful in business before he got into politics. He comes across well. Do you think that's what the party needs, someone like him?
Well, I was impressed by him, and I've been around the kind of Farage project going back to about 2012. It has definitely professionalised. It started really with the Brexit Party movement in 2018, 2019. Very good candidates came on board then. You were one of them, Martin. Not saying you were one of the very good candidates, but around you there were other good candidates. I'm joking, of course, but there were very good candidates around then. And I think that this professionalism around Farage's team is important. The trick is weeding out these bad apples, vetting these candidates and branch chairman much better. I mean, privately, he knows jolly well, Zia Yusuf, there are loads of people out there to bring down this party. They are worried about the threat that they have got against the main parties, Reform and the Tories and Labour. He knows the pressure that there's on them, and they've got to get their vetting right. If that gets right, you've got a chance.
And, of course, that's precisely the kind of thing that a local branch structure will allow to happen, because there's much more subdivision of labour, much more application of resource.
It all starts with the councillors. If they can get some of these 2,000 councillors elected in the local elections in England next May, they could be in business.
Great exclusive, Chris Hope, and superb food for thought. Thank you very much for bringing that to me here on the show. Now, moving on, should teenagers be urged to go down the apprenticeship routes? Because are university degrees really overrated? Well, I got one. Fat lot, it did me. Stay tuned. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Recently, the cartoons that inspired the Bond films have been gifted to the Oscars archive. I'm joined now by John's son, Sean McCluskey. Very good to see you. Welcome to GB News.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have any memory of your dad doing these strip cartoons?
Well, many memories, yeah. We grew up with my father working at a pace. He had to turn in one strip every day, apart from Sundays. So he was always working at the house, and always taking reference material. He had models dropping in to shoot them with his camera. You'd go out in the garden and there'd be a guy with a machine gun and he'd be taking photos of him, things like that. Nice memories.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
What would you say about the way he characterised James Bond?
Fleming was very wary that his highbrow art was going to be somehow diminished by turning it into a strip cartoon in a newspaper, but he met with Fleming, and Fleming had a drawing made of what he wanted Bond to look like, and it was very old-fashioned, very sort of military. And my father kind of, jostled a little bit and came through with a much younger, much more lithe character. And through the first few strips, he moved Bond into a contemporary man, very much part of the 60s, and styled him in that way. And I think there's a lot of rumour that Sean Connery got the gig because he looked a lot like the drawings, because it's hard to believe now, but the strip was billboard advertised across the country.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, it's been a day of excitement and trepidation for hundreds of thousands of teenagers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland as they open their GCSE results. The proportion of students receiving the highest grades has fallen compared to last year, but remains higher than before the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, joining me now is the founder of Finding Your Feet, Corinne Hutton, MBE. Welcome to the show, Corinne. Absolute pleasure to have you. It's a day, one of the days in your life where good news comes in a brown envelope. Later in life, bad news tends to come in a brown envelope from the taxman. The results are slightly down on before, but nevertheless, tell us more about the progress of students across Britain today.
Well, yeah, I'd heard this morning they were expecting it to be an improvement this year, and it turns out not to be. But I just wanted to add my argument to it that I didn't make university. I had to wait a year to do the course that I wanted, and I didn't want to waste a year. So I went out and got a job, passed all my exams, went out, got a basic job and worked my way up. So for me, I remember this conversation a few months ago. I met a girl who I'd worked with when she'd finished a university degree, and she came to work for me in the job I was in at the time. She was 2 years older than me, and I was her boss. And she pointed out to me saying, you know, it really stuck in my teeth that you were my boss and you were younger than me. And I remember that specifically thinking it didn't matter. It didn't matter that I didn't go to university. I went off and I worked myself up quicker. So do not fret, guys, today.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, Corinne. I've never been asked about my GCSE results. O-levels, as they were back in my day, showing my age, Corinne. And a lot of kids these days are probably eyeing up apprenticeships as a better route. Data out today showing the first 5 years after an apprenticeship can often pay a lot better, particularly if you pursue things such as engineering and building. So education, it's not the be-all and end-all, is it?
No, it's not. And I'm going through exactly that with my 16-year-old son, you know, whether he should stay on and further his education, or can he do that in a college whilst earning, or can he go and work in an apprenticeship and learn that way? And you know, I got a degree whilst working. Surely that's far better while you're earning and paying your taxes and having money to spend as well. It's got to be better. But a degree is needed for certain jobs, of course.
But it's also worth pointing out that, of course, a lot of working class kids, when I came from a coal mining community back in my day, I received a full grant. I didn't have to pay for a university. I don't think, Corinne, that I go to university these days, faced with the monumental amount of debt that you rack up at university. People like me wouldn't have made it. And I wonder how many kids across working class communities across Britain are facing that same barrier now, Corinne. They simply don't have the financial means to go to university. And it's that barrier that keeps the best working class talent out.
I absolutely agree. The student loans, the rent on your apartment is just horrendous. So again, if you need it, you need it. You've got to do that. If you really know what you want to do at that age, that's one thing. But how many kids at 16 do? I know my son doesn't. I know I didn't. And, you know, I know so many people that are not in those careers that they thought they wanted. Mine, for example, who'd have known I'd been running a charity?
Superb stuff, inspiring stuff, and you're absolutely right. You know, my son starts his GCSEs next year, so I've got all of this to come. But well done to everybody out there today who did do well. If you didn't do well, don't worry about it. There's plenty of other things to do with your life as opposed to just simply go to university and end up massively in debt. Thank you very much for your time and joining us today. Corinne Hutton, MBE, founder of Finding Your Feet. Now, loads of you have been getting into it so far, and especially you're big on the topic of those migration figures out today. Let's go for a couple here. Tez says this, 286,000, beg your pardon, work visas in the space of 1 year. As you said, Martin, that's a city the size of Newcastle. I don't feel like we've taken back control of our borders. This isn't what we voted for in Brexit. And Miriam adds this on the asylum figures, which I announced are triple what they were last year, an all-time record high, a 40-year high since records began, 68,000 cases of granted the right to remain. Miriam says, I can't see us getting any better under the Labour Party. Do they have the will to stop asylum? Do they have the will to return? Or will the charities and the NGOs and the civil service once again get in their way? Thanks for those views. Now we'll have more on that breaking news story. Football star Jermaine Jenas has been axed by the BBC. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But before all of that, here's your weather, and it's Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Storm Lilian is going to batter some parts of the UK overnight, bring some very wet and windy weather, particularly to northern parts of England. But through today, we do have a cold front making its way southeastwards, bringing a bit of cloud and a bit of rain for some before it clears away as we go through into this evening. Elsewhere, some bright or sunny spells developing behind this system. Also a scattering of showers, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, 1 or 2 showers perhaps for western parts of England and Wales as well. Now temperatures are going to be a little bit on the low side, low 20s towards the south, a few degrees lower than this further north, and feeling cooler than this in those strong winds, albeit they are going to ease for a time as we go into the afternoon. Still clinging on to some cloud and a bit of rain across the far southeast as we go through this evening, but that will eventually clear away. A brighter picture across central western parts of southern England and across the Midlands and Wales as well, largely fine and dry with some sunshine here, turning cloudier, wetter and windier across Northern Ireland as Storm Lilian starts to make its approach. Meanwhile, it's going to be a showery evening across some parts of northern England and much of Scotland, particularly towards the west. The feature that is then Storm Lilian does make its way in as we go overnight, initially brings some wet weather to Northern Ireland, but then that heavy rain spills in across parts of Scotland, northern England and across Wales as well. And it's the winds that we do need to watch out for. Gusts of around 80 miles per hour, perhaps in some exposed spots, could cause some significant disruption. Because of the wet and windy weather, it is going to be a mild night, if not a bit warm for some of us, some places staying mid to high teens Celsius. But a very unsettled start to the day tomorrow. Watch out for those strong winds, could cause some disruption, particularly on the roads. But the feature does clear away towards the east as we go through the afternoon. Some showers following in behind across northern parts, and these could be a little bit heavy at times, but further south it's looking like it's going to be a largely fine afternoon. See you later. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Slow for the M8 eastbound in Glasgow. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road at junction 15 Townhead for emergency bridge repairs. Slow for the M62 eastbound in Manchester due to an earlier broken down vehicle between junction 19 Hayward and 20 for Rochdale. On the M69 in Warwickshire, there's queues. The outside lane is closed in each direction for a spillage following an earlier overturned car between junction 2 of the M6 at Coventry and junction 1 Hinckley. We're seeing slow traffic on the M1 northbound in Leicestershire around junction 24, the East Midlands Airport in the roadworks area. And we're seeing queues on the M25 clockwise in Essex. There's a lane closed on the main carriageway and the entry slip road is partially blocked for emergency road surface repairs just after junction 27 for the M11. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, the BBC confirms that Jermaine Jenas has been dropped from the presenting lineup over reports of workplace misconduct. Sources say the star will fight the allegations to clear his name. And today's immigration data shows an 11% decrease in work visas, but at 286,000, that's still a city the size of Newcastle just last year alone, and with small boat arrivals up since the general election. Can the Labour Party ever take back control of our borders? Talking of which, is Labour eyeing up a return to freedom of movement with the European Union? Well, under new proposals, under-30s would be free to work or study in the UK, which critics say would drive down wages and swamp our universities with foreign students. Plus, of course, it would send net immigration spiralling. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So astonishing figures out today. Truly makes you think, have the lunatics taken over our asylum system? 68,000 granted the right to remain in the UK. That's triple the previous year and a 40-year high. And politicians are actually claiming victory today. 11% down in work visas, but it's still 286,000 people allowed to come legally to work in the UK last year alone. And that's a city the size of Newcastle. Do you think that is taking back control of our borders? And talking of which, if Sir Keir Starmer's plans, which seem to keep coming around with alarming regularity, even though they deny them, to have some kind of freedom of movement deal with the EU for under-30s, we know what that would mean, don't we? We saw it before. The under-30s, brickies, plasterers, labourers, truck drivers, pub workers, factory workers, students, all over again. Is that what you voted for at Brexit? Do you think that is taking back control of our country? Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say, the usual way. But national headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The BBC presenter and ex-footballer Jermaine Jenas has been sacked from presenting The One Show and Match of the Day after alleged complaints about his behaviour. Jenas was reportedly removed from the primetime BBC One programme The One Show following an internal investigation by the corporation. A BBC spokesperson said, "We can confirm that he's no longer part of the presenting lineup. His agency, MC Saatchi, no longer represents him." The family of Morgan Stanley International Bank chairman Jonathan Bloomer and his wife Judy have described them as incredible people and an inspiration to many following their deaths in the sinking of the luxury yacht in Sicily. Tributes have also been paid to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed earlier today. He's among 6 people confirmed to have lost their lives so far after a super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily earlier this week. Another body was recovered from the wreck this morning and brought to shore as rescue efforts to locate the missing 6th person continues. The Italian Coast Guard confirms that person is a woman. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter Hannah was among those unaccounted for after the disaster. Police are hunting up to 3 dogs on the loose, which are believed to have attacked a man found dead in the back garden of a property in Birmingham. West Midlands Police were called to Rubery on the outskirts of Birmingham in the early hours of yesterday after reports that a number of dogs were loose. Officers say the 33-year-old man who was looking after his brother's dogs was found dead in Hereford Close yesterday with dog bite marks injuries. 2 dogs were seized by police at the scene, which are both believed to be American bulldogs, but the breeds of the other dogs are unknown. New figures show legal migration to the UK is down, whilst illegal immigration remains steady. Afghans make up the biggest nationality crossing the English Channel on small boats. There were close to 1,900 asylum applications in the so-called legacy backlog that was still awaiting an initial decision at the end of June this year. The Shadow Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says the reduced figures is down to the Tories.
This is what I achieved when I was Home Secretary, because I made the difficult decisions. And sadly, what we have seen since Labour have taken over is that they are reversing a number of those decisions. They are easing the visa restrictions that I put in place.
3 police officers have been hurt after being attacked at Manchester Airport. The incident happened yesterday morning when police were reportedly investigating an abandoned car at Terminal 2. 3 people were arrested, with 1 man reportedly tasered. Greater Manchester Police are investigating and have said assaults on officers are unacceptable. 3 people have now been arrested after the death of a delivery driver fatally injured during an attempted theft on his van. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder, while a woman has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. 42-year-old Claudio Carol Condor was killed as he attempted to stop the theft of his van in Leeds on Tuesday evening. Officers found the victim unconscious when they arrived, and he was given emergency treatment by ambulance staff, but was pronounced dead at the scene. A drug found to slow down Alzheimer's has been given the green light for use in Britain, but it may not be rolled out on the NHS because it costs too much. The charity Alzheimer's Research UK has urged the Health Secretary to step in, warning it would only be available to those who could pay privately. The new wonder drug, known as lecanemab, the first treatment of its kind, is to be licensed for use in Great Britain and has been shown to slow down the disease by almost 30%. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which provides national health advice, says the benefits are too small to justify the costs. And hundreds of thousands of teenagers have received their GCSE results with a slight drop in the proportion of top grades awarded from last year. More than a fifth of entries were awarded the top grade, slightly down on the 22% last year, but higher than 2019 before the pandemic. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, the long-awaited figures on legal and illegal migration in the year to June 2024 were released this morning, with the latter going up. Now, this comes as reports suggest the government is planning to relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union to allow yet more young Europeans to come and live and work in the United Kingdom. Well, let's discuss this further now with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So James Cleverly has been parading around today trying to claim this as a victory. Of course, these are historic figures from the Conservative Party's tenure. But Mark, when you dig a bit deeper, the fact of the matter is 286,000 work visas were granted last year alone. That's a city the size of Newcastle, and the asylum cases have tripled in 1 year to 68,000, a 40-year high. Mark, the politicians might try and spin this all they like. Is this really a country taking back control of its borders?
Well, listen, there's a lot to drill down into. James Cleverly is right to an extent that the figures are going down, but it's a modest victory at best, and I'm not exactly sure it's worth crowing about, because if you take that 286,000 work visa, add into that families, dependents and student visas, the combined total of the visas granted over the last year to June was 1.2 million, just over 1.2 million visas that were granted. And then just on the work visas, if you take the 286,000 work visas and then add into that the fact that they've taken family and some dependents over as well, then that takes you to more than 500,000 visas, just work-related visas. 432,000 student visas were issued. That's slightly down. Again, that's due to the fact that quite a number of students have had restrictions put on the dependents, family members that they can take over. So it's down about 14% or so. So it's going down, he is correct, but it's modest in comparison to the absolutely huge numbers that we've seen for years now with immigration. And what we don't have, of course, are the Office for National Statistics results, which will come out later in the year, which will then tell us what the net migration figure is. So, OK, 1.2 million visas have been issued. How many people left the country? And you might find that, well, we know over the last year, we were talking 750,000 people were net migrants in this country. It'll have dropped down a bit, but it will still be extraordinarily high. I would say more than 500,000 by the time we get those ONS figures, Martin.
Astonishing stuff. 1.2 million visas. Mark White, well done. You've been through this data all throughout the day to really drill into it. It's so important. We cross-examine this data. The politicians, as I said, they've been trying to spin this as a victory. Mark White, a lot of people will look at that and say, 1.2 million visas granted. That doesn't feel like we're stemming the tide anytime soon.
No, there are definite issues to be addressed in terms of what our legal migration figures are. And we've yet to see really what this new Labour government will do in terms of its policies with regard to visa applications and visas that are granted at the end of the day. I mean, there are these reports, of course, in the Times today suggesting that the government is seriously considering a system whereby those under the age of 30, so we're not even talking 18 to 21, they're classed as young people, but under 30 is a significant old chunk of the workforce who would effectively be given free travel within Europe. If this was to come off, it would be a reciprocal agreement where people from this country under the age of 30 could travel to the European Union to work or study, and then people from the European Union could travel to the UK. Now, certainly, of course, some people from the UK will go, but as we've seen in the past, many more people from the European Union, from those poorer countries in Southern Europe, from Eastern Europe, will come to work in the likes of the hospitality industry. So I think if this scheme was ever put into practice, the numbers coming versus the numbers leaving here would be significantly more.
Mark White, superb analysis, very sobering data there. Thank you very, very much. And a lot of people will be looking at that and wondering, is this what I voted for in Brexit in 2016 and every election since? Now, let's cross over now live to Clacton on Sea and speak to GBNews reporter Ray Addison, who earlier in the day was with Nigel Farage. Ray, give us some analysis of what people in Clacton are telling you about this data.
Well, good afternoon, Martin. Yes, we've come down to Clacton today for the air show. It's taking place right now. Thousands of people have come to the town to look at the Spitfires and the helicopters flying ahead, and it's given us the opportunity to talk to local people and get their views. And the general feeling, the consensus is that although legal immigration has come down somewhat, I believe it's around 11%, people here in Clacton believe it's still too high. It's putting a strain on public services. They've mentioned examples where themselves, their friends and family have been unable to get housing while they've been waiting for long periods of time, and also waiting to get on register with a dentist, or also long waits in for the NHS with emergency services and the like. When it comes to illegal migration, we know that those numbers seem to be pretty steady. However, there's a fear that it's costing the taxpayer billions and billions of pounds every year. They believe that that money could be better spent on things, just simple things like potholes and the like, just to make the everyday life of people who live here in Clacton a little bit better. Now, Labour is saying they're getting very tough on illegal migration. They're saying they're introducing another 100 National Crime Agency investigators, and also introducing tougher policies for businesses, so they could get fined if they hire illegal workers, or they could even do a little bit of bird as well. I got the chance to talk to the leader of Reform UK and the MP for Clacton, Nigel Farage, and I put to him that Labour is getting tough on immigration.
I've heard it all before. Priti Patel said all the same things. If you employ illegal migrant workers, we'll fine you. You may go to prison. Massive penalties for smugglers. Life imprisonment. None of it. And you could put 1,000 new enforcement officers in place. But if the European Court of Human Rights stops you deporting people, what difference does it make? Are very clear that a country is not a country without controlling its borders, and you'll never do that with that activist foreign court in Strasbourg, which, remember, stopped that plane taking off to Rwanda back in 2022. We are clear that is the first step.
Can't let you go without asking you about these Labour plans to potentially relax freedom of movement rules with the European Union, to allow young people to come and live and work here, and our young people vice versa to go and live and work in Europe. What's your response to those plans?
Some of our young people will go to live and work in Europe, but many, many more from Europe will come and live and work and settle full-time here. And many of them may be lovely people, but our population explosion is the biggest social problem we face in Britain. Whether it's housing here in Clacton, whether it's access to GPs or dentists here or anywhere else, a 10 million increase in the population since Blair came to power has devalued the quality of life of everybody. It can't go on.
So quite a lot of scepticism there from Nigel about that concept of freedom of movement for the under-30s across the European Union, and that's been echoed by the people that we've spoken to here. They say, well, if you don't know how many people are coming into the country on any one day, month, year, how can you plan, how can you resource for that? Of course, as I said, Labour, though, very, very keen to stress. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper saying that they're taking strong and clear steps to boost border security and ensure that the rules are respected and enforced. I think people here in Clacton need a bit more convincing in the whole.
Superb stuff there, Ray Ellison. Great reporting all day from Clacton on Sea. Thank you very much for that update. Now, for more reaction on this story, let's speak now to the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates, who joins me in the studio. Rob, just struck me as astonishing when we look at those numbers that Mark White just analysed. 1.2 million visas granted in total last year. This was on the Conservative Party's watch. It's important to point out this isn't a Labour issue. This was a Conservative issue, and yet we had James Cleverly doing the rounds earlier, claiming some sort of victory because 11% down. But 11% down from a massive total is still 286,000 work visas granted in 1 year alone. What's your take?
Well, I mean, we're fiddling at the margins if we start going on about the 11%, and
ultimately what the Conservatives are trying to claim as a victory is them undoing a lot of the damage that they inflicted on the country in the first place. It's their fault that we entered into the system of mass migration with the health and social care visa route, the graduate visa route as well. Both of these have inherently compounded the problem that we are facing with this mass migration crisis. I think James Cleverly is obviously trying to make hay of this in his leadership bid, his ill-fated leadership bid, and I think what we'll see is the conversation in the Conservative Party stagnate and almost accept that this was a victory and it was a triumph of Conservative nous. I think it was far from Conservative nous. I think, as we were just hearing from Ray there, the people of Clacton are thoroughly fed up with the mass migration betrayal that has been inflicted on them over the last 20 years. Repeatedly, we've been promised that the numbers are going to come down to the tens of thousands, maybe lower, and instead we seem to have had a system for the last few years with 500, 600,000 net. The figures today suggest that it will probably stay around about 400 to 500,000 for the foreseeable future, and I don't see what Labour Party are planning on doing that will actually bring that down any further.
Or even more to the point, on the same day, there's another rumour of a freedom of movement deal with the European Union for the under-30s. Now, we saw what happened last time. Hospitality workers, students, plumbers, decorators, truckies coming in and taking working-class jobs. It's an astonishing thing to put out on a day like today. You can see in your figures there, look, of the small boat arrivals. Afghans make up 18%, Iranians 13%, Vietnamese 10%, Turkey 10%. Turkey, I mean, it's not an unsafe country. Syria 9%. Now, you can see that list there, Rob Bates. A lot of those are from countries that we simply cannot return them to because they will claim or their human rights may be affected if they go. So the small boat arrivals seems to be something, no matter what Yvette Cooper says, can we actually send any of these people home?
No, well, we can't send them home. As long as we remain a member of the ECHR, it will be incredibly difficult to actually send anyone effectively home. Obviously, Yvette Cooper has been making the right noises, well, trying to make the right noises, talking about deportations, but the 100 staff that she's recruited seems an infinitesimally small number given the scale of the problem. The backlog now is at a record high of 118,000, and as far as I can decipher, what the Labour Party have actually offered thus far is to deal with that crisis is an effective amnesty to those who have entered the country. We have about 90,000 people in this country that were, earmarked as being eligible for deportation to Rwanda, yet they remain in this country. They remain taking up those 4-star accommodation places. They're costing us £5.4 billion a year. All the while we have, pensioners worrying about the winter fuel allowance being cut and this ominous-sounding black hole. Well, if it's that ominous a black hole, let's do something to address the asylum backlog, which is a huge, huge white elephant that we get nothing out of and actually ends up enticing more people to make those crossings across the Channel.
OK, Rob Bates, superb stuff as ever. Of course, Yvette Cooper has promised to deport 14,000 by the end of the year. Let's see what happens. Rob Bates, always a pleasure. Thank you. Now, police have issued an urgent appeal for 2 dogs they believe are responsible for a fatal attack in Birmingham. But first, more on that breaking news story. Jermaine Jenas has been sacked by the BBC. We can reveal. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. More on the breaking news story this hour. And former footballer Jermaine Jenas has been sacked from the BBC, from the corporation's presenting lineup. The former Premier League player has been removed from the One Show and also Match of the Day, as we understand. Reports suggest it comes after an internal investigation into workplace misconduct. And a BBC spokesperson has said, "We can confirm that he is no longer part of our presenting lineup." Now, sources suggest that Mr Jenas wants to clear his name. And let's get the thoughts now of the former BBC journalist, Danny Kelly. Danny, welcome to the show. So, a startling revelation. The BBC seems to have taken very swift action. And the word isn't ambiguous. He's been sacked.
Yeah, and it takes a lot to get sacked at the BBC nowadays. I wonder, Martin, whether there's some timings involved here. There's a brand new boss of BBC Sport, and don't forget, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, the BBC has come in for some justifiable, stinging criticism as to why they didn't sack Hugh Edwards when the Metropolitan Police actually went to the BBC and said, look, this is what we've arrested him for and what we're investigating him for. Now, we don't know what inappropriate behaviour or workplace conduct actually means. It could be something as relatively low level as talking to somebody in a certain manner, demeaning them, almost workplace bullying. But I don't think the BBC would sack him for that. They'd probably send him on a course. So naturally, we're going to speculate as to what it is indeed that he's been sacked for. What does workplace conduct and inappropriate behaviour actually mean? Curiously, though, I heard in the intro, Martin, that Jermaine Jenas is keen to have his side of the story told. He's actually currently on the radio broadcasting on a commercial rival. So it's going to be fun seeing Jermaine Jenas trying to get out of the global studios at 7 o'clock when his show is off air. And of course, you know, until we find out why he's being binned off, Martin, obviously the internet is awash with speculation. But I just remind you, you know, the BBC do not sack people lightly. So it's got to be something significant.
And of course, Danny, let's not do that speculation. We don't want to get into any trouble. He has said that he's going to try and clear his name. He contests this. And also the Hugh Edwards case, quite a separate thing. But nevertheless, in terms of procedure, Danny Kelly, you know BBC procedure, and I think the swiftness of this action says something. And also reports coming through, Danny Kelly, that a giant mural of the Match of the Day presenters at the Salford Manchester Media City HQ has been taken down with Jermaine Jenas' image on it. So it seems to be that they're taking this rather seriously.
He's also been dropped by his agents, Martin, as well. So the next 12, 24 hours will be incredibly telling. The fact that if the news that you're reporting, and it will be correct, the fact that they've removed his image from a building and the fact that his agents have removed his image from their website, that does indeed lead people into a direction that we will need to know until he comes out, or until the BBC actually issue a press statement to say this is why we've sacked him. Then I think unfortunately, there will be lots of speculation out there. £190,000 a year presenting 2 different shows. Also had a lucrative contract with BT Sport for their motor racing. And also, I believe, a lot of people believe, Martin, that he was being, if you like, the darling of the BBC was being groomed to take over Gary Lineker's job for understandable reasons. You know, Lineker's got 12 months left of his contract. Jermaine Jenas is a terrific sports reporter, although some people say devoid of personality, but that's an opinion that people may vary with. But nevertheless, you know, if they were grooming him to take over Lineker, this is going to put the BBC in a sticky situation.
Okay, Danny Kelly, former BBC journalist, thank you very much for your analysis on the situation around Jermaine Jenas. Thank you very much. Been sacked by the BBC. Now, moving on, police have issued an urgent appeal for 2 dogs they believe are responsible for a fatal attack that left one man dead in his garden. And officers were called to a property in Rubery in the early hours of Thursday, and 2 dogs have already been seized, but now 2 other dogs believed to have been at the scene are still missing. Well, West Midlands police say they believe the dogs are American bully type dogs. And joining me now for a full update is GB News' West Midlands reporter Jack Carson. Jack, welcome to the show. You're there in Rubery. What's the latest?
Well, the going for these 2, but actually the comments that Inspector Leanne Chapman from West Midlands Police Dog Unit made in the press conference that was potentially that they are in the process of looking for, unsure.
OK, we've got some audio issues with you there, Jack Carson. You're breaking up rather badly. We'll try and get back to you later in the show if we can. Now, a lot of you have been getting in touch with your comments throughout the show, particularly around the astonishing immigration figures out today. Mark White bored down those figures. You have to go through these figures very meticulously to get the true stories, not the press release from the government or the Home Office. An astonishing 1.2 million visas issued in the last year to be in the UK. That's the total of the work visas, the student visas, the accompanied people coming with them, family member visas, an astonishing amount of people, 1.2 million. And the work visas alone, we revealed on the show, totals 286,000 work visas. That is a city the size of Newcastle. Do you think that is taking back control of our borders? 68,000 cases of asylum being granted the right to remain, tripling in 1 year. That's a 40-year high. Do you think that is taking back control? Now, coming up, we'll have a GB News exclusive on Reform UK to bring you. We'll be hearing from the chairman of the party on the bids to make the party more democratic and even the right to remove the leader. That's all coming up later on in the programme. Please don't miss that. But first, here's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. It's 5:30. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB Newsroom. Figures shown to GB News reveal that the number of visas issued to work dependents was down 50% between April and June of this year compared to the previous 3 months. 35,603 work-dependent visas were handed out in the last quarter compared to 71,583 between January and March. That's a fall of over 35,000. The BBC presenter and ex-footballer Jermaine Jenas has been sacked from presenting The One Show and Match of the Day after alleged complaints about his behaviour. Jenas was reportedly removed from the primetime BBC One programmes following an internal investigation by the corporation. A BBC spokesperson said, "We can confirm that he is no longer part of the presenting lineup." Meanwhile, his agency, MC Saatchi, no longer represents him. The family of Morgan Stanley International Bank chairman Jonathan Bloomer and his wife Judy have described them as incredible people and an inspiration to many following their deaths in the sinking of a luxury yacht in Sicily. Tributes have also been paid to Mike Lynch after the tech mogul's death was confirmed today. He's among the 6 people confirmed to have lost their lives. Another body was recovered from the wreck this morning and brought to shore as rescue efforts to locate the missing 6th person continues. The Italian Coast Guard has confirmed she is a woman. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter Hannah was among those unaccounted for after the disaster. Police are hunting up to 3 dogs on the loose, which are believed to have attacked a man found dead in the back garden of a property in Birmingham. West Midlands Police were called to Rubery Avenue on the outskirts of Birmingham in the early hours of yesterday after reports that a number of dogs were loose. Officers say the 33-year-old man who was looking after his brother's dogs was found dead even in Hereford Close yesterday with dog bite injuries. 2 dogs were seized by police at the scene, which are both believed to be American bulldogs, but the breeds of the other dogs are unknown. A drug found to slow down Alzheimer's has been given the green light for use in Britain, but it may not be rolled out on the NHS because it costs too much. The charity Alzheimer's Research UK has urged the Health Secretary to step in, warning it would only be available to those who could pay privately. The new wonder drug is the first treatment of its kind to be licensed for use in Great Britain and has shown to slow down the disease by almost 30%. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which provides national health advice, says the benefits are too small to justify the costs. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3096 and €1.1783. The price of gold is at £1,897.57 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 8,288 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, a huge amount of you have been getting in touch today on the migration figures, 1.2 million total. Mark White boiled down those numbers for us, and also the freedom of movement, the return, the potential return that's been mentioned by the Labour Party. And Lily, I think, sums up things rather neatly here, says, I wasn't a fan of Brexit, but that's how democracy works. People voted to control our borders, and this should not be ignored by a government. Tanya says this, I'm starting to feel that our politicians simply don't care about how we voted, and I really think the country is heading for a democratic meltdown. Wow. Well, thanks for all of your comments. We've got a break coming up. We'll be back soon.
Hello again, here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Heads up, there is going to be some unseasonably wet and windy weather pushing, particularly across northern parts as we go through tonight and into tomorrow morning, all due to Storm Lillian, currently out in the Atlantic, but it is heading towards the UK. For the time being, there are still some decent dry sunny spells around, a few showers here or there, but as we go through the evening, we are going to see that wet and windy weather spilling initially across Northern Ireland, then into more parts of England, Wales and Scotland as we go overnight. The heaviest rain likely to be across some parts of southwest Scotland, perhaps some eastern coastal parts. Here some flooding is quite possible, and worth bearing in mind with all the unsettled weather around, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a warm but wet and windy start for many of us tomorrow morning. As we go through tomorrow then, it is the winds that are causing the greatest cause for concern. Around some parts of eastern Scotland it is going to be very windy, some heavy rain continuing here for a time through the morning, showers following in from the west. Showers for Northern Ireland. It's across northern England where we're going to have the strongest winds. Here gusts could reach highs of around 65 to 75 miles per hour, perhaps touching 80 miles per hour in the most exposed spots, so some disruption quite likely. Elsewhere and further south there will be some rain to start off with in the southeast, but that should clear away quite quickly, and then as the whole feature, that is Storm Lillian, clears away into the North Sea, yes, there will be some showers across Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland in particular, but for much of England and Wales, it's actually going to turn pretty pleasant. Lots of sunshine around and temperatures probably a degree or so higher than today. With winds easing, it will feel a little bit warmer. More showers to come as we go through the end of the day tomorrow, particularly across northern parts. Further south, it's looking like a largely fine end to the day, albeit something a bit cloudier and wetter pushing in to southern parts later on. That takes us into a pretty changeable and at times unsettled long weekend for many of us. There will be some heavy rain around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues on the M69 in Warwickshire. The outside lanes closed in both directions on that three-lane stretch of the motorway. From the M6 interchange north of Coventry up to the A5 exit for Hinckley and Nuneaton. Emergency barrier repair works are underway after a car overturned into the central reservation in the early hours of this morning. In Norfolk, west of Norwich, the A47 at Hockering is closed following a serious accident. A couple of problems on the western stretch of the M25. Really slow clockwise after traffic was held briefly after a car broke down just north of the M40, and anti-clockwise after a crash north of the M4. It's queuing back towards 17 into Hertfordshire. And in Pembrokeshire, the A477 shut between Johnston and Milford Haven for those emergency water main repair works. And that's the latest traffic and travel.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38. We're on the final furlong. Let's bring you now a cracking GB News exclusive. Yes, on the back of their election success, the Reform Party winning their first 5 seats in Parliament, Reform leader Nigel Farage decided to switch from a nationwide plan to a local party structure to try and drill in more democracy. To explain this and bring us more is our political editor, Chris Hope, who joins me in the studio. So, Chris, 5 seats were won at the last general election, but it took over 800,000 votes to get each of those seats. There's a feeling of scattergun. There's a feeling the party was in desperate need of organisation and democratic organisation. Tell us more.
To be fair, Nigel Farage gets this, and he told us for GB News before on the eve of election interview with me with him in Essex. He said, made very clear, I needed to democratise. He saw what was coming, and what did happen was 4 million people voted for this party, just 5 MPs at the end of the day. That's not great because Labour are able to target areas much better and get more MPs, of course. So he said he would democratise it and give power to more people. He needs to do that. It's a private company, Reform UK. He owns 8 of the company's 15 shares. The new idea we're revealing today, broken by Zia Youssef, the Reform UK's chairman, is to give members a much bigger say, and crucially, they will be allowed to have a say over the leader in future. Currently, Farage, right or wrongly, is untouchable by members. In the future, in a shake-up to the party's constitution, and this matters, people can get rid of him. And what will mean, if this happens, and will be announced next month at the party's conference, is it will attract other members to join. Even MPs might come across that they can see democracy in action. But earlier, I spoke to Mr Youssef outside Parliament, and this is what he had to say.
Look, we, of course, understand that members need to be given a democratic a set of rights in our constitution. That is what we are working on. That constitution, by the way, Chris, is an incredibly important document. We are chartering a course to be the party of government in this country in 2029. So that document must be fit for purpose today, for the next year, but also for when we're in government. And so we have to get that document right.
And will that document, when we see it, allow members to remove the leader, in this case, Nigel Farage? That's what all parties must have, the right for members to remove a leader.
Of course it will.
Of course it will. There we have Zia Youssef saying, of course it will allow members to remove Nigel Farage. Now, Farage himself, we haven't asked him, but I'm sure will be happy with this. He knows this party has got to grow up, and that involves being have a formal structure. Ben Habib, who's a former deputy leader of Reform, he's been critical of this. He says this party has got to get with it. You can't have this party that wants to win the election, by the way, in 2028, 2029, a massive long shot, but that's what they want to do. You can't have that happen and have a party leader who is insulated from any challenge internally. And in fact, Ben Habib has said on Twitter, or X, shortly after this interview aired on GB News, here's to Zia, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, and thumbs up. So even the critics internally are supportive. This is the right track.
In fact, Ben Habib was sat in that very seat on this very show, airing these concerns. They've been addressed. The party seems to be growing up, and of course we all know, the democratic groundwork, the structure, the weedy bins, the potholes, the councils, the local branch meetings, the boring, the shoe leather stuff has to be in place. We can't have a situation for any political party. The same number of votes for the Liberal Democrats netted 70+ seats, and Reform 5 seats. If they have any chance of success, which, as you say, is a long shot, they need to be doing this kind of groundwork.
Well, they've had success in a limited way. They had a very good air war. They had a good social media media war of the election last month, but they have no idea where anyone lives, no data on that. So Labour, Lib Dems, Tories, they have decades-old data of where the voters live. They know that that's a Reform voter, or that's a Lib Dem voter, that's a Tory voter. They can just knock them up, as in bang on the doorbell, and knock on the door every 4 years and get them out to vote. What this party needs to do is to dig down like Japanese knotweed to get into the kind of Tory ground.
Yeah, a nice little metaphor. Is there another potential hazard here? And that is, we've seen before, if people can join a party and influence getting rid of the leader or influence the next leader, we might see a lot of people with ill intent getting in, as we saw in the Ed Miliband year, 10 quid for a vote, boof, Jeremy Corbyn gets it.
Yes, and there will be some ways to stop this happening. When I interviewed Yusuf earlier for GB News, he wouldn't write or even disclose this detail on the channel, but we'll see detail of that emerge next month, and I fully expect there'll be thresholds of a certain number of MPs to force a vote no confidence, or councillors, or even of members. You need to have those limits to ensure you have a degree of stability for the leader. Looking at the Tory party, they're in a similar mess at the moment, but at some point we're going to see some evidence of this party growing up, and that's what it needs to do if it wants to have any chance of going further at the next election.
As you said, Chris Hope, a mountain to climb, but Zia Youssef, are you impressed with him as an individual?
I was, and I've met a number of these people around Nigel Farage in recent years. I can think back a decade or so, more than that, to the guys around UKIP when Nigel Farage ran that, and it was a bit of an amateur hour. It professionalised, I think, post the referendum, with the Brexit party being set up. There were some very good candidates. You were one of them, Martin. I won't say if you were a great candidate, but you're a colleague of mine. I'll be nice about you. But there were very good candidates on the Brexit party, and they've taken that into Reform UK. They've got, forgive me, 2,300 candidates that are going to put up for the May local elections, 3,000 applications, 75,000 members. This party is going places. Whether it wins the election next time round, that is a very, very long shot.
Chris Hope, excellent exclusive as ever. Now, LTNs have raked in £3 million in the last few years. They could be going nationwide. We're debating that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's News Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
It's a very difficult issue, this, right? As far as we know, the boxer with male chromosomes was born with female genitalia.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite simple. You know, sex in humans is binary and immutable because we are mammals. And there is a minority of people who have disorders of sexual development, and that can affect a person's reproductive organs. But these people are male or female. And yesterday, what we witnessed was basically just glorified male violence against women and girls. The difference is, I mean, that happens every day all over the world. And the difference is that in every other circumstance, we consider beating up women to be wrong, but it was deemed acceptable by those at the IOC because they're claiming that it's sport, but it's not. It's violence and it's wrong.
Peter, Lottie's right, isn't she, that we've been talking a lot recently about violence against women and girls, and regardless of whether this person is intersex or transgender, they have male chromosomes. That means they have a very, very distinct biological advantage that could actually be fatal to a female athlete competing against them.
Well, of course, sport does need to be fair, and we do need to examine this case very thoroughly. There are reports that the boxer, Iman Khalif, was born a biological woman. She is not transgender. She is not non-binary. She is not intersex. She may have elevated levels of testosterone, but that's entirely natural. It's beyond her control. It's the way she was born. And that is why the International Olympic Committee has said that she falls within the rules.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 5:47, the final furlong. Now we've got a juicy debate rocking up for you now. The controversy over 20-mile-an-hour speed limits is intensifying across the UK as, guess what, the Labour Party has signalled its support for expanding these zones and also LTNs. Today we're asking, are these speed limits a necessary measure for public safety, or are they a hindrance or even a cash cow to simply milk drivers dry? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the founder of Fair Fuel UK, Howard Cox, and also the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Let's start with you, Peter. As it's a Labour Party idea, Sir Keir Starmer said it should be up to local councils. It seems that the Transport Secretary has agreed. Tell us why you think these are a good idea.
Yeah, and we've got to keep separate 20 miles per hour zones and low traffic neighbourhoods, and it's the latter which tend to be more controversial. But we know if you have the misfortune to be in an accident as a pedestrian, with every additional 10 miles per hour on the speed of the car, you're more likely to lose your life. And about 1,700 people a year lose their life on the roads, about 20,000 more are seriously injured. This, to me, seems like a proportionate measure to tackle something that should concern us all, which is road deaths and road accidents.
Howard Cox, it of course came in Wales as a blanket limit. It was detested. 70% people objected to it. And in fact, they did a big U-turn on the limit there. Tell us why you think 20-mile-an-hour limits are a bad thing.
Well, there are a number of reasons why. I mean, Wales have actually had an epiphany. It's a Labour government over there as well, and Louise Haigh is going against that. I just don't understand why she's doing this. Now, in a Belfast study, Belfast University study, they did a 3-year study, and there was no demonstrable difference between 20 and 30 mile an hour in terms of accidents, deaths, any of those sorts of things. And the interesting thing about this is, if you drive at 20 mile an hour, you emit more nitrogen dioxide than you do at 30 mile an hour.
So it's more polluting. It's more polluting. Because, of course, you're slowing down, you're in a lower gear. So two factlets there, Peter, to contest your information about the impact on road safety, and also if it's more polluting. Sure, that's a double whammy. It's a bad idea.
Well, you've got to keep, as I said, keep separate these different things. You know, I firmly believe, and I've seen countervailing studies, that the speed of the car which hits you has an effect on your chances of surviving. But that's the 20 miles per hour zone. There's a broader debate on the low traffic neighbourhoods, which have been very controversial. And, you know, for people who don't have one at the end of their street, that's where a busy road is shut, and there's often a tree or a couple of visually attractive devices put there to stop people going down it. And I can understand that because it's disruptive and it doesn't reduce car usage. There's a risk that it moves it to the outskirts of towns where perhaps poorer folk live. So you might have poorer folk being exposed to more fumes. But that's low traffic neighbourhoods. I'm convinced that 20 miles per hour zones will save lives. OK, we just heard from Howard Cox why you think that's not the case. My broader point is this. It always seems to be working class motorists that hit the hardest. It won't affect people who work from home, any of this. It won't affect the latte class. It won't affect those who cycle. It won't affect anybody who lives in Westminster, but it will affect people who are dependent on their cars. And Howard Cox, it seems to me that they're always the one feeling the pinch.
Well, I've been campaigning for 15 years, as you know, fighting on fuel duty. We're still one of the highest tax nations in the world in terms of motorists. The simple thing is that I predicted and I forecast very, very much in all the campaign I did for mayor and also as an MP, I said there will be huge anti-driver policies coming from this Labour government. And I'm afraid it's purely a cash grab. That's all they're doing. Oh, no, it's not a cash grab. We can disagree on principle, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm convinced this has saving lives at the heart of it. No, it's not.
OK, well, gentlemen, we have to leave you there. A fantastic debate. Howard, Peter, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio. Now, ministers are reportedly drawing up plans to allow young Europeans to live and work in parts of Britain as part of a wider reset of relations with Brussels after Brexit, despite Labour repeatedly insisting it has no plans for a youth mobility scheme. However, Labour sources told The Times that ministers privately recognise that they have to give ground to issue to prevent Tory blocs. Now, to discuss this, I'm joined by former Conservative MP and Jacob Rees-Mogg, GBNews presenter, of course, State of the Nation, 7 till 8. Jacob, I'm assuming you'll cover this on your show. This, to me, feels very much like a row back on Brexit.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I think that you've seen a number of signs that the Labour Party wants to row back on Brexit, that going back to free movement of people, just as the figures are showing that the Conservative policy on migration was bringing numbers down, is a betrayal of what people voted for in the last election. Then you have rumours they want to bring Ollie Robbins back as Cabinet Secretary, and he was the cheese-eating surrender monkey of the Brexit negotiations. So I think you're seeing quite clearly that Labour never liked Brexit and is now looking to try to reverse it.
Jacob, the thing I love about you, you always absolutely sit on the fence with your opinions. Do you think people have a right to be concerned? Back in the days of the Brexit referendum, so Jacob, you know as well as I do, I spoke to working class people all across Britain, brickies, plasterers, labourers, truck drivers, factory workers, hospitality workers. Those are the ones most impacted by the freedom of movement of young people under 30s into Britain. And it seems to me the history might be about to repeat itself.
You're absolutely right. Free movement of labour was most damaging to the standard of living of the least well-off. People who were well-to-do benefited from free movement of labour, but the least well-off found that entry-level jobs, their first job, was harder to get and the pay was lower. Free movement of labour, excess migration, lowers wages, and that is obviously particularly difficult for the least well-off in society.
Superb stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, State of the Nation with Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg from your magnificent pile there in Somerset. 8 to 9 p.m. tonight, exclusively on GB News. Thank you very much for joining us. Back with State of the Nation now. Don't forget, it's Tubes and Co next with Michelle Dewberry. That'll be one not to miss. Then, of course, 7 till 8, it's GB News Tonight, and that's with my colleague Chris Hope, who gave us a fantastic exclusive today about Reform UK, planning more democracy, planning more structure, even the ability to vote Nigel Farage out as leader. Could that come back to bite them on the behind as miscreants get involved to try and influence the vote? That's for another time. Now it's your weather with Alex Burke. Have a fantastic evening.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Storm Lilian is going to batter some parts of the UK overnight, bring some very wet and windy weather, particularly to northern parts of England. But through today, we do have a cold front making its way southeastwards, bringing a bit of cloud and a bit of rain for some before it clears away as we go through into this evening. Elsewhere, some bright or sunny spells developing behind this system. Also a scattering of showers, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, 1 or 2 showers perhaps for western parts of England and Wales as well. Now temperatures are going to be a little bit on the low side, low 20s towards the south, a few degrees lower than this further north, and feeling cooler than this in those strong winds, albeit they are going to ease for a time as we go into the afternoon. Still clinging on to some cloud and a bit of rain across the far southeast as we go through this evening, but that will eventually clear away. A brighter picture across central western parts of southern England and across the Midlands and Wales as well, largely fine and dry with some sunshine here, turning cloudier, wetter and windier across Northern Ireland as Storm Lilian starts to make its approach. Meanwhile, it's going to be a showery evening across some parts of northern England and much of Scotland, particularly towards the west. The feature that is then Storm Lilian does make its way in as we go overnight, initially brings some wet weather to Northern Ireland, but then that heavy rain spills in across parts of Scotland, northern England and across Wales as well. And it's the winds that we do need to watch out for. Gusts of around 80 miles per hour, perhaps in some exposed spots, could cause some some significant disruption. Because of the wet and windy weather, it is going to be a mild night, if not a bit warm for some of us, some places staying mid to high teens Celsius. But a very unsettled start to the day tomorrow. Watch out for those strong winds, could cause some disruption, particularly on the roads. But the feature does clear away towards the east as we go through the afternoon. Some showers following in behind across northern parts, and these could be a little bit heavy at times. But further south, it's looking like it's going to be a largely fine afternoon. See you later. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues in West Yorkshire heading east on the M62 this evening, just after the Rothwell exit junction 30. The outside lane's blocked off at the scene of an accident. On the M11 in Essex, the southbound carriageway of the motorway partly blocked, junctions 7 to 6 between Harlow and the M25 due to obstruction in the two outside lanes. Still really slow on the western stretch of the M25. Each way now between the M4 and Maple Cross, partly due to a car that broke down, but also an accident just north of the M40. There's long cleared. On the Surrey stretch further round, just after the A3 exit junction 10, as you come into the roadworks heading clockwise, a car's overturned, blocking off the two outside lanes. And finally on the M4 westbound, 19 to 20 north of Bristol, just off the M5, a car's broken down in the outside lane, causing long queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe,